Well, anyways, hiya! Welcome back to Sileo. Hiya, and welcome back to Sileo Tales of a New Dawn. The game that teaches us that going out of your way to... Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing. I wish I did, but I don't. I have nothing. Anyways, I have to, keep, a close eye on the thing because, I don't know, it seems like it could, shit itself at any moment. Just as a giant, fuck you. So yeah, I gotta, keep a close eye on the performance monitor. Anyways, let's just hop right in. There. That was the first time we ever met. I never forgot the kindness that Apollo showed me back then. And neither did Gran. She never got the opportunity to give him those cookies, and so in her final days, she asked that of me. She bequeathed her recipe to me and asked if I ever found that kind man, I would bake a batch for him on her behalf. And I am pleased to report that I did. I enjoyed them an awful lot. It meant a lot to me. That is a really sweet story, Ty. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea you two met so long ago. It's almost like it was meant to be in some strange way. It's such a shame things turned out the way they did. Indeed it is. Reality has a terrible habit of being positively rotten like that at times. But I shall try not to dwell on the things I cannot change. You know, I so wish I could have seen a picture of Lucas as a kid. The way you describe him sounds adorable beyond belief. Oh, he was, but he was salty enough when I showed Apollo a photo to jog his memory. I do not think he would let me off the hook for doing it twice. Oh well. In the meantime, my imagination will have to suffice. Anyway, when I spoke with Apollo, he kept things brief, to avoid making my exposure worse and all of that. And I was wondering if you could help me fill in the gaps about your relationship with Apollo and all of that. If that is okay with you, of course. Ugh. Sorry, I know I have no right to be so demanding of you on your birthday, especially when I just turn up uninvited. And it's not that important, really. I guess I'm just curious about how it all went down. If you would rather not talk about it, or would rather save it for another day, please, just say as much. Do not fret. I would not tell you about our very first meeting if I had no intention of finishing our tale. And it is nice to have company, though things between us are complicated at present. And besides, just think, it is not as though there is anything left that I could say to which might endanger Apollo. He has already spilled the beans, as it were. Until now, I could only be this candid with Lucas and Apollo himself. If anything, you may at least take solace in the fact that I am enjoying this opportunity to talk about it all. Getting it out in the open makes it all easier to process, I think. It is helpful for me to do so. Now then, I know not what Apollo has told you, so forgive me for starting from the beginning. This story begins a little over a year ago, on a day seemingly like any other. At the time, I had but one employee, Vanessa, and she was not working on this particular afternoon. It had been slow going as I tended the bar alone, wishing for something to take my mind off the monotony. Thankfully, I would have my wish before long, and the sound of the entrance bell announced its arrival. Good afternoon, Good afternoon, may I see the beverage menu, please? To say I was taken aback would be a colossal understatement. As before me stood a man whose face I had not seen in over 30 years. I found it highly peculiar that despite all the years that had come and gone, he did not look a day older than I remembered. In all fairness, it had been a very long time, and I was very young in those days. There was every possibility that I had simply misremembered his appearance. As a child, any adult seems old in contrast, after all, but you and I know that this was not the case at all. There and then, however, I had no concept of Apollo's immortality. But perhaps as I heard his voice, which similarly remained unchanged from what I recalled, such a possibility may have crossed my mind. If only to be quickly struck down by logic and reason. Yeah, I can speak. Is Autumnus my friend? Oh! His acknowledgement caught me off guard, though I knew I should have expected it. I had been staring at his face with my mouth agape for what already seemed like an eternity. I scrambled to save face, trying to sweep away my obvious embarrassment. But I hardly need to explain that to you, do I, Aiden? After all, I've caught you doing it several times already. It is awfully easy to get lost in your own thoughts, especially in the face of something so unbelievable. Oh dear, I'm sorry, you look like somebody I knew once. Please, it is quite alright. You're Ty, yes? Huh? Excitement overcame me for but a brief moment, missing the obvious conclusion which Apollo would quickly clarify. At least that is what it says on the sign outside. It is short for something, yes? Oh, right, yeah. It's short for Taijin. It's traditional. Not even a minute had passed, and somehow I had already embarrassed myself in front of him. It was some miracle that things went the way they did in the end, despite such a terrible first impression. Of course, that was not the first time we had met, though he gave no indication that he recognized me, which only further aggravated my doubt. It was then he told me his name, a name that most certainly was not Solomon. I see. Where are my manners? I know yours, so it is only fair that you know mine as well. My name is Spencer. It is a pleasure to meet you, Ty. I've been meaning to visit this bar for some time now. I am glad to have finally seized the opportunity. It's good to meet you too, Spencer, and there's no better drinking hole in all of Woodcrest. You won't be disappointed. Such confidence, though I suppose I should have expected that from a rock star. Eh? You know about that? Of course, surely people have not forgotten so quickly. The Black Claws were the very finest among our homegrown talent. It was always such a shame you boys split up, and at your peak no less. Yeah, well, the darkroom had been our usual spot. There wasn't anywhere else we could play. Add some internal tensions and you have a recipe for a breakup. It had been a long time coming, I think. Tensions? With whom? Glenn, our front man. He was a big problem for us. Or a little one, if the rumors are correct. Lucas and I were certainly larger, but in Glenn's case, small time was the only small he ever was, though his ego might suggest otherwise. Believe it or not, he stands at a perfectly reasonable height. The problem was that he always had to be the biggest guy in the room. Wait. Hold the phone for just a second. Oh? What is wrong? You never use contractions. I can understand that as a child, but this wasn't even that long ago. Well observed. During my younger years, I spoke in a manner one could only describe as crass, but as the years passed me by, I became somewhat more proper in that regard, choosing more elaborate and formal language accompanied by the finest of manners. It has served me well in this line of work, and fits the image of my bar to a T. My disaster for contractions, however, well, what can I say? His charm rubbed off on me in many weird and wonderful ways. Now then, where are we? I was all too eager to put my money where my mouth was and retrieved a beverage menu from down below, sliding across the counter where Spencer had perched himself. As I made eye contact, I once again could not believe the uncanny resemblance. You are most kind, my friend. I knew all too well that he appeared far too young to be the same man I had met all those years ago. By the look of him, I doubted he had even been alive so many years ago. He appeared to be in his late 20s at most, if not even younger still. But surely it could not have been a coincidence. He was the spitting image of Solomon. Could Spencer have been his son? Surely there was some relation. I could no longer contain my curiosity and saw no good reason not to at least ask him about it. Excuse me, Spencer, would you mind if I asked you a question? You might find that you just have. I mean, can I ask you a different question? Spencer smirked as he looked up from his menu, and we locked eyes once again, delivering his response with a smug sense of accomplishment. You are making this too easy, for I think you might find that you have now done that as well, but forgive my sense of humor, or better said, my lack thereof. Ask away. I was wondering if you know somebody called Solomon. Hold up. He went from a smile to a pissed off look. Knowing what we know now, it was obvious what this meant. But there and then, I simply did not parse his response in that way as he glared back in silence for an uncomfortably long time. Our eyes still locked when he finally answered the question. I'm sorry, that name does not ring any bells. I see. Thank you anyway. Any normal person would have followed this with a "why do you ask?" and the absence of this question was yet another clue which sailed cleanly over my head. Then again, I would not have time to dwell on it as I was about to run into something of a snag. Now then, I'm sure you've decided by now, so what can I get you? Do you keep another menu for the top shelf? What? What do you mean? A fine establishment like this must surely stock some more refined beverages, yes? This menu cannot be everything. Oh, actually, yeah, that's everything. If you are looking for something fancy, there is a beautifully aged brandy on the back page. The Osiris? You surely jest with such vile filth. Vile filth? In those days, a $350 bottle of brandy easily fit within the scope of what I considered to be a fine beverage, and was a centerpiece of my selection. All the time I had believed it to be a rather respectable drink. Though I suppose it made sense. I was a musician, not an alcohol aficionado. I did not know the first thing about what comprised a fine drink. In the beginning, I had poised the bar as a live music venue above all else. It just so happened that I was making far better money on the bar side of things than anywhere else. I leaned into that, renovating the bar and adding a kitchen, hoping to pair the two for maximum impact. But to say I had much of an idea of what I was doing or what was good would be an outright falsehood. I had many good recipes for cocktails and an excellent range of typical spirits, and that was fine. For my average patron would not know a sophisticated drink if it collided square with their jaw. But Spencer Apollo, he was far from the average patron. He was one with 6,000 years of experience behind him, over which he had refined his palate to a degree no mortal could begin to comprehend. If the brandy is not to your liking, why not try pina colada? It's our house specialty. Good heavens, I apologize if I have caused any offense. I had not thought you were serious at first. It would seem that I have mistaken your establishment for something it is not. Only I am to blame for this, so I hope you will accept my sincerest apologies. Does that mean you won't be having anything? I am sorry, but there is nothing you offer which I desire. Please know this is a problem with my tastes and not your selection. I regret that I have wasted your time. That's quite alright, really. Can I offer you a meal instead? Regretfully, I possess dietary requirements that are both incredibly specific and oftentimes notoriously unwieldy. Oh, do you have an allergy? I am more than happy to accommodate you. Just let me know what you need and... Ty, I am sorry, but it is not something so easily accommodated. I think it would be best if I were simply on my way. I watched as Apollo stood from his seat and offered a gracious and apologetic bow before he began his approach to the bar's front door. Hiya. Oh, don't worry about being late. Honestly, you kind of missed out on when the stream was like having issues. We're in the middle of a flashback right now. I watched remembering the time I had watched Solomon disappear into the night as a child. It had been 20 years since Gran had passed. I still had not delivered those cookies to Solomon like she had wanted, and I had been waiting more than 30 years hoping to meet my savior once more. But I did not believe Spencer and Solomon were the same person. The likeliness was such that I felt compelled to stop him in his tracks all the same. Wait! Another clue, though this time a clue I noticed. Apollo stopped in his tracks but did not immediately turn back to face me. I saw him take a deep breath in those few moments before turning back toward me to see what I wanted. While it was true that I lacked any beverages that tickled his fancy, this was not Apollo's real reason for leaving. He knew. He knew exactly who I was. It was the reason he had delayed his visit for so long, with him usually scoping out new businesses immediately following their opening. The bar had already been established for several years by this point, and it was also the reason he attempted to leave so suddenly. He had not expected that I would remember him, much less address him by a name he had abandoned so long ago that Gran would have still been alive. I posed a risk to his safety, and thus he knew he had to leave. But he possessed a great deal of curiosity about me and the life I had led since our last meeting, and he also had something of a soft spot for me, even after all those years. Those were the reasons my hopeless bluff had any impact whatsoever, though all along he knew it was exactly that, a hopeless bluff, and part of him was curious to see how far I was prepared to take it. Yes, what is it? I don't suppose you could help me improve the menu, could you? You look like somebody who knows his way around a drink. Excuse me? What is that supposed to mean? It sounds as though you think I am some kind of alcoholic. Oh, no, I am sorry. That's not what I meant. I just mean you clearly have refined taste, and I don't. Truth be told, making music has been my life for a long while now, and I'm a fish out of water when it comes to this sort of thing. So I would really appreciate your help. Only if you want to, of course. I don't presume to... Oh, hush already, I jest. As for your request, you do sound as though you direly need professional advice. That makes it sound like I need therapy or something. Why else do you think I worded it that way? Revenge is a dish best served cold, my friend. I deserve that. I'll try to be more careful with my wording in the future, but does that mean you will help me? I suppose just the once cannot hurt, right? Though I must warn you, you cannot do something like this in half measures. Go big or go home, as they say. Your bar's reputation will be determined by your selection, and when it comes to your name, nothing but the best will suffice. Right, no price is too high. None? Truly? I was an idiot. I knew that the money required to construct such a sophisticated top shelf was not something I simply had lying around. And that was before considering I had underestimated just how extravagant Apollo would have me go. Well, that is marvelous. I am so very pleased that you are serious about this. In my humble opinion, Woodcrest has a need for a world-class bar, and with your eye for decor, I suspect nothing will need to change. Thank you, but decor means nothing without the selection to back it up. I could not agree more. Now then, let us begin by choosing a whiskey. A good whiskey can become the beating heart of your top shelf, the beverage by which all others will be measured. With most beverages, the world-class selections are near exclusively imported, but that is not so when it comes to whiskey. As it happens, many of the world's finest are brewed right here in our wonderful homeland. What better reason to make a fine whiskey the centerpiece of your alcoholic portfolio? And let us be reasonable for a moment. Why spend 5 digits when you can do just as well with only 4? The thought of spending 4 digits on a single bottle was enough to make my eyes water, let alone 5. Alas, by the end of the day, I would have done so several times over, all because of a stupid bluff. And I think that just about covers it. If you want to go for extra credit, there are a few more obscure drinks we could use to bolster the selection and make it somewhat more exotic. For instance, Ortega is renowned for their incredible firewater. I think it might be best if we stuck with the core selection for now. Of course, you have made quite the selection already. You will be the envy of every bar for miles to come with such an impressive selection. Mark my words, enthusiasts will come from far-flung lands to sample such an impressive selection. Enthusiasts are one thing, but you're another. Would you travel a long distance for these drinks? Of course, I would not have recommended them if I did not believe they were worth the investment. Does that mean you'll be back when my stock arrives? Absolutely, I would not dream of missing it. Do you promise? Promise? It had not crossed my mind, but Apollo had remembered the promise he had asked me to make him all those years ago. This time, the shoe was on the other foot, and he knew as well as I that his patronage would be required to recover from such an extravagant expenditure. Certainly, Ty, you can count on me returning soon to sample your inventory. I promise. Great, I'll get in touch with my suppliers shortly to get the ball rolling. Excellent. Ty's bar will be the talk of the town in no time. Thank you, Spencer. I really appreciate the help. Of course, I'm always happy to lend a hand. I knew from experience that those weren't just empty words. The day so many years before, his intervention may well have saved my life. He went well out of his way to find me and escort me home, just like he did that day in helping me to improve my beverage selection. Even then, on our first encounter in such a long time, I could not help but succumb to Apollo's allure. He was usually colder and more distant with people, but he could not bring himself to be that way with the small tiger he still so vividly remembered. I did not know it then, but that was the beginning of a very special journey for the both of us. Well, how was it? It is exquisite. You have once again chosen wonderfully, my dear friend. I wiped the sweat from my brow as immense relief flooded over me. Apollo had of course been true to his word, returning to sample the bankruptcy-inducing range of world-class liquors. It would have been an incredibly expensive mistake to have chosen poorly. Thankfully, Apollo's wholehearted approval put those fears to rest, his warm smile the greatest seal of approval I could have asked for. Now, I hope this doesn't come as an unwelcome surprise, but I expect you to pay for what you've consumed. You are aware of that, yes? Why, of course. Fear not, I have no shortage of funds, and will happily cover any costs incurred, especially with such a fine selection of beverages and such fine company. Thank goodness, I was concerned for a moment, though flattery will earn you no discounts. Duly noted. Even during those early days, being with Apollo was like being reunited with an old friend. There was this untold spark between us, this connection that made our every interaction seem electric. Perhaps this was why he had finally decided to reveal his hand. He knew my plea for aid had been little more than a ploy to ensure his continued company, though I did not regret having done so, at least once the financial bruises had faded away, though I was unaware at the time that he also knew why I had done so. I must say, you have spent a pretty penny humoring my outrageous demands. A bold bluff, of that I am certain, but surely you cannot enjoy my company that much. It would seem that you have me pegged, though I am curious whether that was the case before I spent tens of thousands on liquor. It was. Though certainly the exorbitant price tag would deter you. Instead, I now feel obligated to enjoy these beverages to help your finances recover, something that demands my continued patronage, which, if I am not mistaken, was your original objective. From that perspective, it seems as though I have been outmatched. A happy accident, though I don't regret the drastic improvements to my selection either. Make no mistake, and your continued patronage is something I'm looking forward to. There's something about you I find fascinating. Fascinating, you say? You should at least know that feeling is mutual. I believe that you and I will become fast friends as I drink my way through your world-class stock. Now that sounds like my kind of plan. Fast friends indeed. We rapidly advanced beyond that point and into more dangerous territory, something that was met with some initial hesitation on Apollo's part. He held on, watching closely for signs that it might be sensitive to his pheromones, for reasons not to take the next step. As no signs nor reasons came to the fore, he gradually began lowering his guard. Of course, we were a fantastic pairing. Little did we know that I was slowly but surely becoming exposed, something we would not discover for an extremely long time. Because of specific quirks in my genetics, the negative effects of exposure progressed considerably slower than the norm. Something that was as much a blessing as it was a curse. It allowed our relationship to progress as far as it did before the symptoms would finally become impossible not to recognize. The symptoms I would eventually exhibit would not be accurate to the severity of my exposure. Unlike you who experienced your first symptoms within a matter of days, mine would not manifest for several months, and unfortunately, my rate of recovery in present day seems similarly protracted. But I digress. Apollo quickly became a regular customer, and a wonderful payday to boot. Some days the profit made from his drinks would outweigh everybody else's combined, and his flattery would indeed earn him a discount in direct contradiction to my previous assertion. Though no matter how hard I pushed, he would not accept one. There were times I slipped a discount onto his bill without his knowledge, only for him to notice and reverse the figures, paying the full amount and causing no end of strife when it came time to balance the register. And through all of this, I had all but forgotten about his potential link to Solomon, my focus instead firmly fixed on Spencer and my feelings for him that were developed within me, and the more time we spent together, the more those feelings continued to grow. Hold on a hot fucking minute. Hold up. I know this is like Diego before the whole Kyrix thing, but honestly, this looks so wrong in so many ways. It looks wrong. It seriously does. You're shitting me, right? How can one shot of that stuff be worth more than my weekly pay? This, Diego, is a delicacy. This one is... It was the favorite of coal miners working on the Eastern Plateau for many decades. They likened the bitter taste to a bolt of lightning which helped them to remain alert during the long, grueling shifts in those dark and cramped mine shafts. It looks so wrong. Diego, you look so wrong right now. I'm sorry, but you do. Yo, where the hell did you learn this shit? You seem to know everything. I think you will find that very story inscribed on the reverse label. Eh? Diego briskly flipped the bottle, an action which very nearly gave both Spencer and me heart attacks. It was one of the 5-digit beverages, you see. Losing a bottle like that would have been far more than a tragedy. So it does, smartass. Diego, manners around our patrons, please, especially one as important as Spencer here. Fear not, it is no trouble, Diego, was it? It is a pleasure to meet you. I do not think that we have met. Only started last week. Been training with Vanessa most of it. Been really kicking to get some people drunk. Oh my, I think you have bitten off more than you can chew with this one, Ty. Don't be so quick to underestimate me. I eat troublemakers for breakfast, and I haven't yet found one that wouldn't fit. Whoa, kinda gay, boss man. What? Oh dear, I didn't mean... I will have you know I can be quite the troublemaker myself. Is that right? Yo, I can't even... What the hell is going on here? Say, I think it would be a good time to give the tables a wiping down, don't you? Aw, hell, table duty, seriously? You're killing me. Maybe you're right about him, Spencer. Save your scorn for a shitty employee that deserves it. I thought that's what I was doing. Yo, what the... Ooh, that will leave quite a bruise. Yo, screw you guys, I've got tables to wipe. It's better than being around your lame-ass jokes. The shit I do for money. Man, I swear. Oh, thank God. He's gone. And with that, Diego did as he was told at long last, wiping down the tables which left Apollo and me to converse freely amongst ourselves. I don't think anybody can unsee Thin Diego. It's so wrong. Oh fuck, YouTube's still checking the video. It's so wrong. Gotta say, I'm having some regrets about that one. I quite like him. Even back then, Diego was quite the firecracker. Apollo enjoyed the bickering and banter between us a great deal. It was easy for Apollo, he didn't have to deal with him. By this point, Apollo and I had grown quite close. My desire to be more available during his visits was one of my key motivations when it came to hiring Diego. Our time at the bar rapidly overflowed into spending time together outside business hours as well. One day, I invited Apollo to enjoy a quiet day with me at home. We had planned to watch some movies, share some drinks, and most of all, relax. And of course, that was the day when everything could have gone awry if the bar did so. It began when our HVAC system suffered a catastrophic failure in the dead of winter. The writing had been on the wall for some time, but the timing of it all could not have been more inopportune with the sting of our top-shelf expenses still searing. The call from Diego was predictably melodramatic, saying how he was freezing to death and what bad press I would be in local newspapers. Eventually, we installed a whole new system, but back then I could only afford to keep the system going just a little while longer. Both the technicians and I had only just arrived when Vanessa suddenly fainted and was taken to hospital for observation. Nothing serious, thank goodness, but it was a mere 2 weeks later that she handed in her notice. I suspect the incident may have encouraged her travel plans. I made a call to Apollo after the fact. I told him that things had gone from bad to worse and that I would have to cover what remained of Vanessa's shift. But then, the frantic waving of Diego's arms caught my attention. I'm scared. Yo, Ty, you got a date or something? Wouldn't you like to know? Aw, come on, who's the lucky guy? Promise I won't tell anybody. Oh, it's just gotta be Lucas, right? It's about time you kicked that shit up a notch. What? No, it's not Lucas. I don't think of him in that way. He's my best friend. Come on, everyone has feelings for their best friend, dude. That's just how this crap works. It most certainly is not. Psh, fine. If it ain't Lucas, I'll just keep guessing until I get it right. I would prefer if you did not. I mean, it's fine, I guess. Can't even think of nobody right now. The reason I asked is that you know you don't need to stick around, right? Oh dear, what terrible plans do you have in store for me now? You've already taught me all this shit. Tables upside down on chairs, cash register, tray in the safe, arm the alarm, lock the bolts on the doors, bring the grills down, and lock them with the padlock. I think you mean chairs upside down on tables. Yeah, so funny. Anyway, I know this shit. Leaving closing the bar to me and get your ass back to your hot date. The prospect terrified me. The last thing I felt comfortable doing was leaving the store in Diego's questionable care, especially when this would have been his first time doing it. I still wasn't sure just how much I trusted him. Come on, that anonymous hottie of yours is lonely without you. Let old Diego take care of things here. I think everyone prefers Lucas's smile to this. Hey, just think, I'm buying you enough time to strut your stuff. Play your cards right and maybe tonight will come with a happy ending. Oh, for the love of... I caved, if only to silence Diego's incessant prodding, running through the procedures for closing several times over with him. At no point did he appear to learn anything new, nor did I feel any more secure with each passing repetition. But it was all I could do to ensure the safety of the bar. Nervously, I departed the bar at long last, hoping that it would not be the last time I saw it in one piece. I called Apollo to give him the good news and quickly commenced my journey home where I would find him waiting. I'm scared. I'm just going to bring this up because, I'm sorry, Diego's route has scarred me. Upon my arrival, the delicious scent of a freshly cooked meal greeted my nostrils before I even made it through the front door. I had not expected Apollo would cook. It was quite the pleasant surprise. That was the first of many surprises in store for me that night, and it was what he cooked which would serve as the catalyst to usher the rest in. Spencer, you cooked... You shouldn't have. I was going to make us something myself, and you are my guest after all. I realize that, but you have instead endured a stressful afternoon at work, so I took it upon myself to ease your burden, if only a little. It was the very least that I could have done to have a home-cooked meal prepared for your return. But Spencer, no buts. Forget being a gentleman for just a moment and enjoy dinner instead. You deserve to relax and unwind. Apollo gestured, instructing me to sit as a smile radiated with such warmth that there was practically no need to light the fire on that cold winter's night. I had wanted to be the one to cook for him, but I knew that his reasoning made perfect sense. I did as instructed, taking my position at the table where a piping hot meal waited patiently for consumption. It smelled incredible. I had no idea that Apollo was such a talented cook, though in hindsight, this also made perfect sense. I genuinely appreciate the sentiment, Spencer. This looks lovely. I'm sorry, what exactly is this? Beneath a thick golden layer of melted cheese on top, I could not rightly identify the dish. A shepherd's pie, perhaps? Maybe a fish pie instead. Some kind of pasta bake? Truly, you do not recognize it? Oh dear, I hope that I've done it right. It is, or is supposed to be, a lasagna. Lasagna? Of course, how foolish of me. Lasagna had been a childhood favorite of mine, though in those days my preferences had been rather peculiar. A discerning customer, Solomon had once said in response to that one strange quirk of mine. I began absent-mindedly toying with my meal, lost in the depths of my memories as I recalled the time Gran prepared lasagna for my birthday, but had used larger sheets as it was all she had available, and I acted as though it were the end of the world. I felt terrible about that looking back. She had gone through such effort, and I had so ungratefully refused it for such superfluous purposes. Kids can be so cruel sometimes. I scooped up the first mouthful of Apollo's dish with my fork, revealing the thick layers of meat and pasta beneath. Immediately, I noticed an oddly familiar peculiarity. The layers were not continuous, but inconsistent and even, almost as though he had used... Is something amiss, Ty? You used the loose pieces, not the sheets? I did. But that cannot be. How could you have known? Unless... I'm afraid I have a confession to make. The very first day I visited you at the bar, you asked me if I knew knew a man by the name of Solomon. I told you I did not. That was a lie. For that, I apologize. Then, I take no pleasure in keeping secrets, but I do so for my own safety. I had no idea that you and I would become close. I'd avoided visiting you for so long simply because I feared you would remember me, and that could have been a dangerous situation for me. But even though you had, I wanted so badly to speak to you. A lot of time had passed, a lot of things had happened in your life. After that day, I felt some sort of duty to keep an eye out for you. I did not interfere, mind you, except for one specific time. One specific time? Indeed, I feared the worst, but I could not reveal myself to you, so I made sure that Lucas would know where to find you, and I made sure that he knew what was at stake. He's a good friend. He dropped everything to meet with you that day. That was you? You saw all of that? Saw me at my lowest moments? And your highest. You have no idea how proud I am of you for turning your life around like you have. You have grown into a magnificent adult and have enjoyed such success. I am so very glad that you lived to experience it all. Who are you, really? It has been so long since we first met. You must be in your 60s at least, right? I never thought to ask your age, but you certainly do not look that old. You cannot be the same person, surely. Is Spencer even your real name? What do I call you? I have been known by many names throughout my long life. Those important enough to me know my secrets. They know me as Apollo. My other names are merely pseudonyms intended to conceal my true identity. I am so confused. I have all the time in the world, as you will soon find out. Rest assured, I will reveal everything to you this evening, but... Our dinner is getting cold. Let us dig in and enjoy a meal together before we get down to brass tacks, yes? Okay. My fork had been suspended over my plate the entire time we had been talking, simply waiting for me to take a bite. With a million questions still floating around within my head, I instead forced them aside and took a hearty bite of my meal, and I could not believe what I tasted. Holy hell, Apollo. This is the best damn lasagna I've ever had. Oh my, such high praise. Do you truly mean that? Though I am sure nothing beats what Gran used to make. Are you kidding? She burnt it half the time. I was a stupid kid. I didn't know the good from the bad, but this is sensational. It warmed my heart to hear you say so. Now then, speaking of Gran, I trust you kept the promise you made me. I did. I never ran away from Gran like that again. And here I was worried I would have to get those arcade passes back from you. But humor aside, I am very pleased to hear that. Gran, she never forgot what you did, you know. She always wanted to express her gratitude to you, even years and years later. I kept my promise to you, but I made a promise to Gran a very long time ago that I'll bake you some of her cookies if I ever met you again. And this time, I'm not letting you refuse. You don't even think about trying to run away. Cookies? I see. Well, I'm not going anywhere. Know all you are here, so I suppose I have no choice but to gratefully accept. Good. And for what it's worth, I never forgot your kindness either. You saved my life that day. And if what you told me before is true, you've done so more than once. And I didn't even thank you quite as well as I would have liked to the first time. But now finally I have the chance. So thank you, Solomon, Spencer, Apollo, whoever you might be. Thank you for looking out for me, for saving my life. If it weren't for you, I doubt I would still be here today. Thank you. Thank you so, so much. My heart. That night, he told me everything. About the Immortals, about his 6,000-year life, about his pheromones, about Artemis. He told me everything. He did so because he had fallen for me. Because I, too, had fallen for him. He wanted to take the next step, but he knew that the only way to do that was to tell me everything. It was a colossal risk, but he felt so strongly about me that it was a risk he was willing to take. Wow, Ty, that's such an adorable story. After all that time, you both remembered each other, fell in love. It's so damn sad things ended how they did. That must have hurt you both so much. It did. It does. Even now. It hurts like it only just happened. That night he told me about his pheromones. He told me I surely would be showing symptoms then if I were susceptible. We had both believed we were in the clear. Sometime later, I began recognizing certain symptoms and behaviors that matched what Apollo had described. I was distraught. I did everything in my power to hide it from him. That was nearly impossible. One night we spent the night together, and we met in a dream. That is how we found out. Through that dream, he could also estimate the severity of my exposure, and he told me that by all accounts, I should already have gotten feral. I had done my best to keep a handle on it, but even with my atypical resilience, I still felt a grip on sanity slipping. And while Apollo could consort an elixir capable of preventing pheromone generation, this elixir had zero impact on the immortals themselves, only those afflicted downstream. It seemed as though there was no solution. It was only a matter of time before Apollo's dire prophecy would come true. I knew how he would respond. I knew because it was the only way that he could. So, in an act of desperation, I proposed to him, presented him with this ring, this heirloom. Gran had worn for as long as I could remember, and before that, it had belonged to my mother before she passed. And Gran had then passed it down to me. I wore it every day for 20 long years, and it remained suspended from my neck through many relationships, waiting for the right person in the right time. Apollo knew all of this, and so when I offered him this ring, he knew how desperate I really was. I was willing to do anything at all, so long as I did not lose him. But deep down, I already knew there was no solution. There was no happy ending, and so the conversation which had begun with my proposal ended with our parting. Is this just NSFW's Utopia? Through all the heartache, I had forgotten all about the ring which remained in Apollo's possession until a mere 3 days ago. I believe he longed for the future that ring symbolized as badly as I had. I believe he had a difficult time letting it go. I've been heartbroken before, but never like that. Splits resulting from disagreement, more irreconcilable differences from betrayals. Those are so much easier to process, but with Apollo, I still love him to the moon and back. I feel as though a part of me has been torn away. Love lost forevermore, even now. It is a different kind of pain, one that casts a shadow over everything I say, everything I do, every emotion I feel, positive or otherwise. That night that you and I split the first time, I was worried, scared perhaps, scared that you were only dating me as a distraction, as a way to ease the pain and help you forget about Apollo, right? Indeed, I mentioned before that Lucas had talked some sense into me. While that was true, it was predominantly Apollo's words of guidance that set me back on track. He said that love was not finite, that someone can love several people with all of their heart. That love is not something you have to share. I was worried about that myself. And Apollo delivered those exact same words of advice. He said that just because you still loved him, it did not mean that you could not love me with all of your heart too. Exactly right. And yet, despite hearing those words back then, I still squandered that opportunity. I still acted like a fool and lost you. You're kidding, right? Here I was, listening to a private conversation through the damn fence, only to catch a sliver of conversation out of context and go fully nuclear. There's nothing right about how I acted. I was a complete idiot and a total asshole. None of this would have happened if I had been more communicative with you to begin with. There were things I could have said, things I should have said, and I did not. Besides, by that stage you had become rather severely exposed yourself. I'm sure you know how that impacts your judgment. I knew all too well. And Ty having said so only reminded me of the conversation we would still need to have. There were other matters to attend to first, which was fine by me, anything to put it off for just a little longer. As true as that might be, I will not use it as an excuse. I acted like a dick, and... Aiden, I will not concede on this point. Without the mistakes I had already made, you would not have been in a position to make your own. It is like I said. I could have said something. I should have said something. But I was a coward, and that cowardice kept my lips sealed. Suffice it to say, I had never dealt with a situation quite like Apollo's before. I knew that the slightest slip of tongue could have devastating consequences, and I feared that giving you vague answers would only further fuel your curiosity. I discussed this matter with Lucas a week or two before we arrived in Woodcrest. We both agreed that it was better to be safe than sorry, and we agreed on a vow of silence. It was the only way to be sure that Apollo would remain safe, and back then, we had no reason to believe this would become a problem. But then you arrived, and quickly we became involved, and at some point, you became aware of Apollo's existence. It was the day after we split up the first time. I hadn't slept well the night before, and I fell asleep while working for Lucas. I was already kinda exposed and having one of those weird dreams. Apollo then arrived in the real world and unknowingly bled into my dream, making it weirder still. I see. It makes sense why that would pique your curiosity, especially if your dream was the first time you had seen him. That would not have made sense and would have been surefire proof that you're sensitive to pheromones. Though exposure is not a requirement for such a thing to happen. But I digress. If I had not been such a coward, though, with the UMC agents skulking about, it is hard to be too careful. Whoa, excuse me, a UMC agent is here? Apollo did not mention this. Indeed, he keeps a close eye on local databases, especially those that might contain information relating to him, which is how he found out that Dom was helping me find information about him, and presumably how he leaked his location at Dom, knowing he would pass it on to me. I guess that means Dom wasn't the only one digging, huh? He believes that is the case, yes. He knows the UMC here watches Woodcrest after an incident a few years back, but he believed they have moved on. Having found no traces in person, as for why they have returned, that is anybody's guess. It might just be routine surveillance. It's hard to say how much they know. Certainly, if they have not acted yet, they cannot have enough information to go on. But it is nonetheless a cause for concern. It has amounted to nothing before. I sincerely hope the same thing happens in time. I had no idea. I really hope so too, and I cannot blame you for not saying anything. It is an unusual situation. I wouldn't know what to say myself. I thank you for your understanding, but it does not excuse my failure. It is like I said, there were things I should have said. If I had considered my words carefully, perhaps I could have averted this crisis without putting Apollo at risk. I bear the burden of that mistake. No, we both screwed up. I share in that burden. I guess that makes us both a pair of idiots, huh? Aiden, you do not... Ty. This time it's a point that I won't concede on. We share the blame, and that is all there is to it. Very well, but for the record, what I said yesterday at the cafe, I meant every word, even now. You did the right thing standing up to me. The right thing looking out for yourself. I respect that decision wholeheartedly, and respect you for having made it. No, I should have trusted you. I should have known the love you felt for me was genuine, and that you wouldn't do anything to betray me. All this crap about faith... God, I feel like such an idiot. I'm such a goddamn idiot, Ty. No, you are not. You were right back then. Trust is not given. It is something you must earn. And I had done nothing to inspire confidence. I'm sorry that I kept so much from you. I'm sorry that my foolishness caused things to end the way they did. I'm sorry I was so hurtful about it. Remember the look on your face that night? It hurts. God, it hurts so much. I hate knowing I hurt you like that. I hate remembering how nasty I was about it all. As a matter of fact, I, for one, am grateful that you were. Hold on. Drop some. There it is. What, are you nuts? Why? It was a wake-up call. It helped me to put my failures into perspective. It helped me to learn where I had gone wrong. But perhaps even more importantly, it drew my attention to just how out of character your behavior had become. I'd never known you to be like that. Okay, and that's a good thing. How exactly? Well, for a moment, I worried that Diego's bad examples was having quite a profound impact on you. You should have known by then to follow his lead. No, but really, it reminded me of myself. It reminded me of how I had felt and how I acted as a thrall of my symptoms. I'd already suspected that might have been the case, but it was right then I realized for certain. I knew that I was no longer speaking to the same Aiden I had met a week prior. I contacted Apollo as soon as you left and told him. He was distraught to hear how things had ended, but he agreed with my assessment. Of course, I did not know that he would set off on a journey back to his historic abode immediately after my call. But that is not the point. The point is that I am the reason you became exposed. Apollo had warned me that my pheromones were potent, and that I would be safest to avoid close contact with anybody until they had subsided completely. But I also knew the likelihood of complications was so very, very low. I am so sorry for afflicting you with this horrible sickness. It was my fault for taking that risk, my fault that it backfired, my fault for not recognizing your symptoms sooner. I feel terrible for inflicting such torment on somebody I care about as deeply as you. I don't blame you for any of it, not one bit, so please, save your apologies. Oh, and actually that reminds me. I remember that Apollo had given me a supply of medicine that would not only treat the symptoms, but also stop the transmission of pheromones, at least for a short while. The quantity was such I had enough to give some to Ty as well, something I suspected was Apollo's unspoken intention. I retrieved the small box he had given me and revealed the contents to Ty. Upon sighting the vials, he simply smiled before retrieving another identical box containing the vials full of the very same pink-colored liquid as my own. I mentioned Apollo visited me last night, yes? Well, this was why. I thought it was strange, especially considering that you and I had broken up. I assumed he was simply taking precautions to avoid any future incidents until my symptoms had subsided. Little did I know the two of you had met, and that he had sent you on a quest to Somerville, though he did say something that caught my attention. He said that I may be needing this medication soon, and I guess this is exactly what he meant. Oh, and in case you are worried, yes, I have taken a dose today. Being here with me will not be progressing your symptoms, so please do not worry about that. As long as I continue taking these, my presence will no longer pose a risk to anybody. If only I had paced myself in the beginning. Right, Apollo said you had built up a resistance to it. I guess that's still the case? Indeed, it helps a little more than before, but certainly not as much as it did in the beginning. I'm sure you are finding your symptoms more manageable with the medicine. Just be sure not to repeat my mistake. Pace yourself. Just one a day. Were your symptoms really that bad that you were chugging several a day? I thought you were dealing with it pretty well until that point. No, I was simply hiding it well, and avoiding scenarios where Apollo might notice. I'd been doing so for a while, but it grew harder and harder to maintain as my symptoms grew more severe. And combined with the grief following our separation, well, let us just say that it was an ugly few weeks. The worst of my symptoms had eased by the time the medicine lost efficacy, but it had nonetheless been an exercise in willpower to uphold the illusion of normalcy. I'm sure Diego noticed, though he would not have known why I was acting so strangely. Come to think of it, he did mention that you had been off for a short while, though he definitely had no idea why. And don't worry, I'm pacing myself. Still getting some fucked up dreams, but it seems to keep me in check throughout the day at least. I'm glad to hear that, Aiden. The dreams, yes, they are something. Are they not? I never quite know what to expect. I see Apollo often, though I know it is not the real thing. I see you as well, though once again, I know you are not real. Wait, that reminds me. When I visited Apollo yesterday, I fell asleep beneath a tree in his yard. I didn't think he was home and was going to wait for him, but I was exhausted. I hadn't slept well the night before. I cannot imagine you did. You were out until very late. Yeah, anyway, he was home. He was asleep. I think he planned to measure my exposure while he was asleep and had the power to do it. And then he was going to wake himself up to come find me, but I fell asleep before he could and we met in the dream instead. He showed me his memories in vivid detail. The question I'm getting to is that you and I are both exposed, right? Does that mean the same thing can happen to us if we were asleep in proximity? Like, say, the night of the camping trip? Yes and no. While we are exposed, we are constantly transmitting information of our own via our reproduced pheromones. We are also perceptive to the pheromones of the others in this state, meaning that if we were to sleep in proximity, it is feasible that we could somehow share a dream. Unlike an immortal, we have no control whatsoever over our pheromones. As such, this may or may not occur, and if it does, it would not be something we can control in any way. Without comparing notes, it would be impossible to know if this had happened or not. Well, we have spent 2 nights together so far, the night of the festival and the night of the camping trip. I didn't dream the first time, at least not that I recall. But the night of the camping trip, I did. Did you? I did, yes. We were right here in my special place, and when the clatter of pots and pans stirred me from my slumber, I felt compelled to give you a proper wake-up call. I could not help myself. You see, for some ungodly reason, in my dream you had been in a state of complete undress. Sheesh, dreamy must be some kind of nudist or something. I dreamt about myself last night, and for some reason, the other me was naked there too. Perhaps it is time to join a colony of some sort, eh? Anyway, does my dream ring any bells? Sadly, no. I don't think we had the same dream, and maybe that's for the best, because in mine, you were shackled to a wall of Pharaoh with blood dripping from your maw. I never knew you were into such things, Aiden. I'm not. I mean, I don't know. The timing was super weird. Just as you broke free and caught me, you started, doing your thing in the real world. It was the weirdest thing. It sure sounds like it. Though I wonder if the feral aspect had some meaning. After all, you know what happens at the highest levels of exposure, yes? A person loses all control. They answer every impulse, follow every whim, act upon every urge. They can be unpredictable and violent. Feral. Feral? What do you mean by feral exactly? In most extreme cases, a person can lose all control over their actions and become little more than a wild beast until such a time that they have recovered enough to regain some semblance of control. You can experience brief moments of this in anything more serious than a mild case, but in greater severity, these experiences become harder and harder to control, and their frequency will increase sharply until they become constant. It is a frightening thought. At my worst, it took incredible focus to remain in control. I've experienced moments of that myself. On the camping trip, I assume. That was one time, though I felt I still had control over my faculties then. I guess I just allowed it to take the reins for a bit, but there was another time too, and that time I know I wasn't in control. Oh? Indeed, the moment I first saw Logan. The moment I first caught his scent. Feral. Feral seemed like a good way to describe it, and my actions resulting from the events of that encounter were still a topic that needed discussion. Though depending on whether Ty wanted to give our relationship another go, I might not need to bring the topic up. And so far, Ty had given no such indication. I was nervous. What if he didn't want to try again? What if he felt that remaining apart would be for the best? Ty, I'm sorry about everything. I know, and I'm sorry as well. It takes two to tango, as they say, and we have certainly proved that we cannot dance. We sure did, even though I don't blame you for any of it. I hope you know I forgive you for everything regardless. And I forgive you as well, Aiden. Silence befell our encounter as I sat, waiting for Ty to say something, hoping that he would say something. After everything I had done, I understood if he didn't want me back, but I desperately hoped that was not the case, because I wanted him back. I wanted him back so badly. But the silence only continued as Ty gazed toward Woodcrest at the fiery orange hues of the setting sun lit his fur gloriously alight. He was as magnificent as he had been that night we watched the sunset from our campsite deep within the mountains. That was such a special moment, such a magical moment. The love we shared for one another then seemed endless, and our future prospects seemed so bright. It was nice to enjoy a few carefree days, not knowing what awful things the days to come would bring. But it seemed like after everything that had happened, we had reached the end of the road. I did not want to press the matter. I did not feel like I deserved another chance. If Ty wanted to give things another go, I was certain he would have said so. I'm glad we got to clear the air, Ty. As am I. Ty smiled gently toward me before turning his focus back to the gorgeous sunset ahead, which cast jagged mountain-shaped shadows across the town below. It wouldn't be long before it got dark out, and Ty seemed as though he had simply appreciated a chance to settle our affairs properly once and for all. I understood. Things between us had been so messy, so ugly, so damn complicated. As much as it hurt, it still made perfect sense that he would rather put all of this behind him. I wouldn't beg. I had no right. I had no damn right, but it still hurt like hell. I guess I should be getting home now. I forgot to tell Diego where I was again last night, and I promised I'd be home tonight. I'm going to try and find a way not to tell him about Apollo. He was part of all that searching, and he knew I went up there. I'll think of a way to let him down gently. I feel bad about having to keep him in the dark. He's my best friend, after all, but it's better than Apollo risking his own safety. Diego's going to break my kneecaps for sure after this, though. Break your kneecaps? That is an oddly specific threat. What else would you expect from Diego, I suppose? He's one of a kind, that's for sure. Aiden, learn from my mistakes. Telling him nothing will do you no favors. In fact, by the sounds of things, if you do not, you will wind up in a wheelchair. Joking aside, try to address his key concerns, but think carefully before you speak. Remember that a single slip of the tongue may be all it takes. Do not reveal Apollo's immortality, his true name, or anything that might give him away. And be careful. Diego is quite the firecracker, as I am sure you know. Are you sure? That seems super risky. I am. Just think how different things might be between us if I had done so with you from the start. Do not risk your friendship with Diego, and telling him nothing will probably only make him more determined to find out. This way you may just be able to sate that curiosity. Alright. Still, I'd be surprised if Diego doesn't flip his lid about this. This is Diego we are talking about. It would be strange if there was not at least a little bit of yelling. But just think, no matter how badly you screw it up, you won't have screwed up worse than me. Easy for you to say with your kneecaps not at risk. There's Dom as well, and he did most of the searching. He's more measured than Diego, but I bet he's still going to be pissed. Just think, he won't be able to break your kneecaps on account of Diego already having done so. Gee, thanks, Ty, feeling real confident about it all now. You're quite welcome, my dear. Just promise me you will be careful. I'll be careful, I promise. As the conversation once again gave way to silence, a sense of finality shrouded us both, suffocating my final hopes of there being any future between Ty and me. Nonetheless, I was still glad we had spoken properly, not like we had at the cafe. At least I found some semblance of closure. At long last, I stood for my position beside Ty against the lone tree in the center of his secret place, and made sure all of my belongings were present and accounted for before turning back towards Ty and speaking to him once again. Thanks for chatting with me, Ty, and good luck finishing your song. It's going to be a hit, I just know it. Thank you, Aiden. I'll see you around sometime. Indeed, it has been good seeing you again, Aiden. And you. I began making my way back to the entrance of the overlook, but stopped after only a few steps, having remembered what I'd forgotten to say moments before. Oh, and happy birthday, Ty. Tears began to well up in my eyes as I picked up the pace in a bid to leave before Ty could see that I was crying. I didn't want to walk away. I hadn't wanted it to end like this. I had hoped for one last shot. I had hoped for happily ever after. But this experience merely served as an uncomfortable reminder that real life isn't some kind of fairy tale. In real life, you don't always get your Prince Charming. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking this is somehow unjust, but the world owes you nothing, and nor does anybody else. It was just like how Ty and Apollo had been forced apart by unfortunate circumstances beyond their control. It was clear by how Ty had spoken about him that he still loved Apollo with every fiber of his being. I couldn't imagine the pain they were both feeling. I never wanted to feel that pain. It was just like how Diego fell into a relationship with Kyrix, a relationship that ruined his health, his motivation, and his self-esteem, all the while leaving him with so much grief, anger, and doubt. And despite that, he had put all of his pain aside to help me with my romantic drama. I'd love to think that I would have done the same, but if that were true, why had I not done so already? I was his best friend, and he had bent over backward to support me. I made a mental note to check in with him, to make sure he was okay, to be a shoulder for him to lean on. And it was just like how Dom's continued evasion of Russell's attempts at setting him up with Axel had been taking their toll on the poor cheetah. Axel had grown more and more doubtful. Dom felt the same way, and that, combined with his gradual reawakening of feelings for Russell, was a source of substantial anguish. No matter where I looked, it seemed like nobody was suffering from heartache. It seemed like love was destined to bring pain to those caught in its horrible snares. Love could be wonderful, but it could also be such a horrible, miserable, and tragic thing. I wasn't alone in my pain, but that knowledge brought me a little comfort. At the end of the day, this was just another bad ending to another short-lived romance, right? Ty, you better say something. No. No fucking way was I letting this be the end. It was as though 1,000 voices from the depths of my mind screamed at me, demanding that I turn around and shoot my shot, leaving nothing to chance, demanding that I tell Ty how I really feel and praying that he feels the same way. I spun a 180 and began retracing my steps, and the tree behind which Ty stood returned to my view. Its leaves were the same fiery orange of a tiger's fur, intensely illuminated by the late evening sun. Step by deliberate step I marched, determined to face my fate head on. I realize we are the arbiters of our own destinies, that we possess the agency to ascribe meanings and purpose as we see fit, and that we alone decide our fate with the actions we take and the company we keep. Why wish for a hand that was dealt for us when we already possess the freedom to choose which cards we desire? We are free, and if you ask me, that is the most wonderful reality we could have ever wished for. Fate had ordained that Ty and I would remain apart, but it is our actions which define our fates, and I refuse to accept such an outcome without a fight. We are free to shape our fates as we see fit, and perhaps it would still be possible to reshape mine. I grew closer and closer, the gentle evening wind once again masking my footsteps until I was right beside him. Having finally heard my approach, he sprung to attention and turned to face me head-on. His expression was one of profound sadness and uncanny likeness to my own. I stopped dead in my tracks only a meter or two from where he stood. Our eyes locked in as the mutual tears that streamed down both of our cheeks said everything that needed to be said. My heart pounded in my chest as he gazed back intensely, neither of us knowing what our next move should be. But then I saw the seeds of a smile planted, growing bigger and bigger with every passing second. What began as a twitch of his lips spread into a full-blown grin, which I couldn't help but promptly return. And our instincts engaged in perfect unison. I know, I got my heart. My big gay heart. We threw ourselves into each other's arms without hesitation before clamping them shut to squeeze the other with every ounce of our strength we had. Our lips collided at supersonic speed as we plunged deep into a passionate and unbridled kiss. He squeezed so tightly that I feared my ribs might fracture. That was the last thing I needed on top of my soon-to-be shattered knees. Though, of all the ways one could become injured, being crushed by the awesome power of Ty's muscular appendages seemed like a pretty good way to go. And a broken rib or two was a small cost to pay, considering what I had gained. I'd break every bone in my body if it assured me the happy ending I was seeking with such fervor. But thankfully, it appeared such a sacrifice would not be necessary. Our tongues clashed, sparring like ferocious beasts that became entangled in extravagant knots as our tears joined hands upon our rosy cheeks and plummeted to the grass below. They were no longer tears of sadness and pain, but tears of adoration, relief, and joy. This continued for an eon as I blissfully remained within Ty's firm grasp, pressed tightly against his flawless body. As I nestled my snout into the velveteen fur surrounding his neck, a similar scent of cinnamon and coconut welcomed me home. It was so good to be home once again in Ty's loving embrace. I couldn't tell you how long we spent entwined in each other's arms, having reached an understanding in perfect silence, that such a volatile and complicated situation could be reconciled with nary a word spoken. I knew that this time around things would be different, and our love would triumph over all. Fatigue would soon set in. characterized by our aching shoulders and our numbed tongues, and so we sat down together side by side with our backs against that lonely tree, holding hands with vice-like grips, neither daring to let go as though the other might simply float away in the calm evening breeze. Oh, they're doing what otters do. Otters hold hands. Seriously, like, let me pull up this shit. Let me pull this up. Sorry, I also had to, like, finish posting the YouTube video. Seriously, otters hold hands while they sleep. Fuck. See, they hold hands while they sleep. To prevent each other from floating away. And it makes my heart say yes. And I feel like that's what Ty and Aiden are doing right now. They're holding hands. And so we sat, gazing towards the setting sun whose luminous glow was only to that of our joyous smiles. There was something magical about this encounter. We had come together in unity, our hearts and minds in perfect sync. I stared lovingly upward, casting my gaze deep into Ty's magnificent eyes, which gazed back with a soothing sense of tranquility. Tumbling ever deeper into that violet nirvana, I felt as though our souls had become intertwined. Their once solitary melodies joining forces to comprise the most exquisite symphony imaginable. While so much was said through the serenity of silence, there was so much more that simply could not be. Therefore, when Ty's voice marked the ending of that magical moment, I felt no sadness, only joy for the good fortune through which I could experience it all. And besides, his voice was another of his most majestic qualities. His unrivaled eloquence so intense and captivating, and his honeyed words music to my ears. To be speaking with Ty as his lover was the greatest honor of all, and I would be wise not to take it for granted. Thank you, Aiden, for coming back. I'd feared that was the end. It was a gamble. I did not think you wanted me. You gave no clear indication that you wanted to continue. It's what I had hoped for coming here, but I didn't know if you felt the same way. I just wanted to be respectful of your wishes and tactful. Aiden, my love, I never stopped wanting you, never for a minute, and you did not make your desires quite so clear either. I did not know if you wanted to go through all of this again. God, if there's one thing we absolutely suck at, it's communication, huh? We're such a damn mess. As I said before, it takes two to tango, and neither of us has a clue how to dance. It's okay, though, because now we can learn together, right? Together. I would have it no other way, my love. Yesterday at the cafe, watching you walk away was one of the hardest things I've endured. I was standing there, watching you walk out the door for what seemed like the last time. I realized that at that point, I'd fallen in love with you without even noticing. I completely fell apart after you left, made a fool of myself in front of everybody in the cafe. Thank goodness Jay was there to save me. He got me out of there, took me home, he had my back, and I appreciate him so much more than you could ever know. He's a good person. He is. You know, as I walked away, I realized the same thing, and just like you, that was not the first time I had really come to realize that. But you did not give chase, nor did I turn around. I'm so grateful that things are different today. I'm so grateful we finally get a happy ending. No, a happy beginning, because we've got so much joy and happiness ahead of us yet. And this time, there will be no more drama, no more bullshit, just happiness. Agreed? Wholeheartedly, my dear, wholeheartedly. And you know, given that realization, I think it's important to say those words to one another. And with that in mind, I love you, Aiden. I'm sorry things have been so tumultuous. Here's to smooth sailing from here on out. I love you too, Ty, more than you'd ever believe. And here, that is a toast I can get behind. Indeed, my love, indeed. And this time, there's a weight off my shoulders. A sense of liberation. I have no secrets to hide. I can be honest about anything and everything with you. I was a fool to think a relationship could thrive while predicated on secrets. This time will be different. I wish to make a commitment that I'll tell you everything, anything and everything, no matter what. I will answer my questions with complete honesty and be forthcoming about everything you would want to know. That is a promise. This time will be different. This time I will be better. Thanks, Ty. I trust you. Forget Faith. Faith is a crock of shit. If you'll excuse my language, I trust you, Ty. I trust you like I always should have done. And I promise to never abuse that trust again. I'll tell you anything you want to know. You only need to ask, okay? Okay, is there anything you need to get off your chest? Oh, not that I can think of. No, why do you ask? The commitment that Ty had made was of the sort that meant nothing without being reciprocated. I wanted to be able to make the very same commitment, but before I could do so, there was still the matter of Logan hovering over my head. If I was scared before, I'd become positively petrified now. I had finally gotten what I'd hoped for, but disclosing my encounter with Logan to Ty threatened to unravel it all. I prayed Ty could forgive me. Please, please let him forgive me. There was no way around this. I could not keep this a secret. This time we had to do things right, and that meant total honesty from both sides. I was committed to my relationship with Ty. I had to do this, even if I felt sick to the stomach as I did. Because I have something I need to get off mine, and I don't know if you're going to take it. It's kind of a big thing, but I don't want to keep any secrets from you. I'm committed to this. I want to do what's right. My goodness, that sounds a touch ominous. I cannot imagine anything you could say that would change things between us. Whatever it is, I'm certain that I can take it. So go right ahead, my dear. I am listening. I really hope you're right. If there was anything that could screw things up, this could well be it. Worry not, my dear. I am certain you are overreacting. There will be no judgment on my part, my love. When you are ready. Well, I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. The one thing that could ruin our happy beginning. That one stupid decision that could cause our shared happiness to disintegrate around us. The day after we split up, I was at the hot springs with friends. Apollos, ironically, and a stranger showed up. I caught his scent, and it was like I fell down some dark hole of primal lust. One of the others brought me back to reality, and realizing just what had gone through my mind, it was horrifying to say the least. I'd completely lost control. I can relate. Those times I caught your scent on our camping trip, it was so hard to regain my composure. My mind raced. Honestly, I never fully regained control until after I became fixated. It sounds terrible to say, but until after I had my fill. And the Force later on, right? Precisely. I allowed you to capture me, if only because I feared what I might do if it were the other way around. I had such a fragile grasp on my sanity. I'm thankful things worked out so well. You even taught me quite the lesson. I did, and I'd done nothing like that before. I'm amazed I didn't hurt you. Oh, you did. But it was so very twisted out of shape that I only felt pleasure. It's scary how deep the whole rabbit hole goes, anyway. When I caught this stranger's scent, I too became fixated, and well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it didn't really come back until the beast had been fed. Oh, so I slept with him, Ty. As soon as I said the words, I felt my face flush with shame and regret. Ty's expression remained as unchanged as stone. However, something that made me feel quite uncomfortable, at least until Ty delivered his response. Was there something else? What? No, that's it. I see. Well, did you have fun at least? Come now, Aiden, do not be afraid of saying yes. It would be much worse if you did not. It was amazing. I had a really great time. Tremendous. I know those sorts of encounters can be very hit or miss at times, so I am glad you had an excellent result. Whoa, wait a minute. Back the truck up for a sec. Is something wrong, Aiden? I should be asking you. I just told you I slept with someone else, and you are acting like it's no big deal. Should it be? Come now, Aiden. You should know me better by now. We were not together at the time, so no harm, no foul, and if you enjoyed yourself, that is simply a wonderful bonus. Seriously, though? A lot of guys would be flipping their lids right now. Well, it is a good thing I'm anything but an ordinary guy, is it not? If anything, I am somewhat jealous. Jealous? Don't be. Casual stuff is meaningless. It's so much better with someone you love and care about. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know, busting a nut, I guess. Which is quite alright. Sometimes a hand simply cannot satisfy. Am I right? I can't deny that, but hey, I have a request, and it's really important to me, even though I know it might seem weird or wrong. Certainly, my dear. What is your request? I'd like to remain friends with this person. I will be 100% committed to you, obviously, exclusivity and all that, but he's a good person, and right now, I think I'm the only friend he's got. I want to be there for him, as a friend, that's all. Well, that is very noble of you. Of course you can remain friends. I would not dream of dictating the company you keep, my love. If I had concerns about your trustworthiness or the people you surround yourself with, I most certainly would not be here. But I am, and I know you will do nothing that I would not approve of, so go right ahead. This friend of yours has my support. Well, full support. You're weird as hell, Ty, but in a sweet and wholesome way. I kinda love it. I owe you one. I would be predictable and respond with the casual, you owe me nothing spiel, but truth be told, there is a way that you could repay me. Oh, sure, just say the word. Well, it sounds as though you had quite a good time. I'd so love to hear the details, if that does not make you feel uncomfortable, of course. Have you lost your mind? Not at all. I simply wish to know what fun my lover has been up to in my absence. Okay, well, he's a polar bear. His name is Logan. He's very shy on the surface, like, very shy. But once he warms up to you, he's the biggest sweetheart. Yes, those sorts of people are often the best people you will meet. You simply have to put the work in. Yo, it's like using so much CPU power. It's insane. He was very withdrawn to start with. Russell had seen him fight in the combat tournament and had taken quite an interest. According to him, Logan is quite an impressive combatant. Oh, that Logan? I had not put two and two together. Huh? Do you know him? Oh no, I simply know of him, that is all. I saw him here and there last year when I was taking part in the tournament myself. Impressive is certainly an apt description of his fighting abilities, if not quite the understatement. I really ought to catch one of his fights and see what the fuss is about. Anyway, Russell couldn't melt the ice, so to speak, and nor could the hot springs for that matter. Russell seemed to give up, but I was hell-bent. So I asked him to lunch, on my tab no less, an insane decision considering I had just left my job. But insane explains my mindset at the time perfectly. I'd met him at the Café du Monde. Hey, excuse the detour, but that was named after Apollo, right? Indeed, he was the longest serving of the three founders and was held in very high esteem throughout his tenure. Though records surrounding him are scarce, the stories of his time as mayor still spread, albeit with several curious embellishments that have become attached over the years. The cafe, or Jay so informs me, was named in his honor. The owner is quite the fan of those old stories. I see. Anyway, I invited Logan there for lunch. He ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. Apparently he wanted to see just how far I'd go. Still, he downed an entire pastry platter on his own. I had Diego try to do the same yesterday. It didn't go well for him. After that, on the walk back home, he called me out. He seemed to understand what it was that I was after. He was worried I only wanted to sleep with him and that my show of interest was a deception. And at first it was, but it's, well, hard to explain, I guess, but there was something underneath. Some aspect of his personality which I had perhaps seen a glimpse of, or maybe not even that. Maybe I just felt there was something underneath his standoffish personality that piqued my curiosity. I came clean, and I told him I was interested in being his friend as well as, that other thing. I knew I'd been acting up. Last thing I wanted to do was force him into anything he wouldn't be comfortable with. So I laid my intentions bare and left the ball in his court. I gave him my number and told him what the next move was, that the next move was his. If I heard nothing, I'll leave him alone, but if he wanted to take me up on any of it all he had to do was message me, and then we returned to our homes. I thought for sure I'd blown it. It was late in the evening, about 10 o'clock. Diego would arrive home shortly. I thought for sure that I wouldn't hear anything. Figured he'd have messaged long before if he was interested. I'd given up hope, but that's when I got a message from him inviting me around for sex. I was really uncomfortable at first, to tell you the truth. I didn't understand it then. I'd done that sort of thing before, but I never felt that nervous. In hindsight, I think it was because I still loved you. I hadn't realized it yet. I was still angry, still disappointed, still full of spite. I hadn't begun hurting properly yet. I hadn't accepted that you and I were done, and I think that's why I felt like I did. But I pushed through. Went inside, he was butt naked on his bed, ready to go. Magnificent view, but he was even more nervous than I was, so I kept him company instead. He's a scary movie buff, so we watched one of his favorites. It terrified me. That's very sweet of you, Aiden. You did the right thing not pressuring him, and you made good on what you had said earlier about wanting to be his friend. Well, it wasn't a lie. As we walked that afternoon, he told me how he feared being used. He told me how he didn't trust people, how people always had ulterior motives. That's why he was so distant. Though he never really told me what specific offense had led him to adopting that persona. And me dropping my sexual intentions and just being a friend to him, me making good on that commitment and showing him I meant what I said, that finally encouraged him to open up with me. And wouldn't you know it, he's a total sweetheart, a little aloof, sure, but a sweetheart all the same. I'd spent most of the day trying to drag him into conversation with no success, and here he was just happily chatting with me. Admittedly, I felt very accomplished. I also learned that, well, he had nobody. He lived alone and had no friends. He was so alone in every aspect of his life. I see. I fully understand why you would prefer to remain friends with him. You want to be there for him and be that friend he needs. And you feel as though backing away now, regardless of your reason, would undermine your genuine care for him. Exactly. To tell you the truth, if you had said no, I was quite willing to, don't take this the wrong way, but I would have chosen him over us. Not because I want that friendship or anything, but because he has done nothing wrong. I'm all he has, and I feel like I owe it to him to be there for him, especially after pursuing him so intently. I don't want it to be just a stupid fling. I want to look out for him, and I refuse to let my mistakes rob him of that. And it's not to say I think so highly of myself, but... My love, I understand completely. You need not justify those feelings, and for what it is worth, I find it very noble of you protecting others from the consequences of your own decisions. If I was more selfish, I'd put myself first. Why should I enjoy the spoils when my actions cost him to miss out? That just isn't fair, so thank you, Ty. Thank you for letting me be there for him. You've spared me a lot of guilt. Hopefully I can be the friend that he deserves. It is as I said, my dear, I have no desire to dictate the company you keep, nor do I have any concerns about whom you surround yourself with. If you vouch for Logan, I believe wholeheartedly that he is a good person, and I believe wholeheartedly that you are good for your word. Thanks, Ty. I don't deserve your trust, but I appreciate it all the same. Nonsense, my dear. You are nothing if not trustworthy, and being so forthcoming about your encounter with Logan only goes to prove it. Speaking of which, I am curious to hear what happened next. Well, he'd opened up to me a bit by this point. We'd finished watching the movie and it was quite late. I'd been satisfied with how things had gone. Honestly, if nothing happened, I would have been 100% okay with that. But let me guess, he had grown comfortable around enough in your company to give it a shot. Yep, he proposed the idea. I was happy to, but I made sure it was what he wanted first. He told me a bit about himself, including that he was a virgin. He had been wanting to lose his virginity for a while now. He felt as though he was too old to have not lost it at 22. He'd never quite pulled the trigger, though, until that night that was. He didn't want a relationship or anything like that. Despite how much he'd opened up with me, he was still a serious introvert and didn't want somebody else around 24/7. That, and to tell you the truth, he mentioned a friend from a few years back. His name was Toby, I think. A friend with whom he'd lost touch after a bad-sounding dispute. Toby had moved to Sidonia a few years back. I don't think he outright said so, but I think that friend would be the only person he would date. Do you know if Toby is short for anything? I don't know. Logan mentioned nothing. Why do you ask? Well, you mentioned Logan was 22, yes? I happen to be acquainted with a young man by the name of Tobias who is 22 at present and moved to Sidonia some years ago. Perhaps they are the same person? Maybe. I should ask him for more information next time I see him. Do you know how to contact this guy? Lucas does. Perhaps more importantly, if they are indeed one and the same, Tobias actually moved back to Woodcrest some time ago. I was visiting Lucas one evening when Tobias was staying there, and I vaguely recall an estranged friend being the passing topic. That definitely sounds promising. What exactly is Tobias' relationship with Lucas if he's staying at his house? It is a complicated tale with a few prerequisites. Forgive me, but I must establish a few things first. To this very day, Lucas helps the orphanage out from time to time by doing fundraisers and providing various services. And without fail, he takes a group of kids out of town every school holiday to some far-flung location. Normally, the orphanage... Exactly. Normally, the orphanage would be incapable of affording such things, but Lucas foots the bill every time. Without him, those poor children will rot from boredom. The state is relatively unconcerned with improving funding, I'm afraid. That is the only time the matron gets a vacation of her own as well. The very same that cared for Lucas all those years ago, in fact. Wow, she must be getting on in her years. She was actually quite young when she first took over. That was around 40 years ago now. She is in her 60s now. It is good for her to have an opportunity to enjoy a brief vacation from time to time. I thought Lucas didn't like the orphanage, though. He did not, no. And I would wager that none of the children in attendance now feel any different. They would all rather have parents, a house, and possessions of their own. The things normal children take for granted, but the orphanage does the very best it can to look after them while trying to make that happen. Most children will be adopted within a year or so. The younger they are, the quicker this tends to happen. But there will always be unlucky children who endure year after year without finding a family. Lucas was one such case. He was surrendered as an infant, and would spend the next 9 years as an orphan before a brave couple would finally take pity on him and give him the home he deserved. What do you mean when you say they were brave? Well, something you will find if you look at adoption statistics nationwide is that young bulls in orphanages remain there for more than 3 times longer than average. This is largely on account of the stereotype that bulls make for aggressive and unmanageable teens. Of course, between Lucas and me, I was the aggressive and unmanageable one. He was always so calm and collected, so mature and measured, and he remained an orphan for 9 whole years because of a stereotype that was not even accurate. I've heard that before. Poor guy. Kinda surprised Grant didn't adopt him. Definitely foreshadowing. Though, seems like he spent most of his time with the two of you already. Indeed, and this pushed Grant to her limit financially as it was. She had retired to care for me before she was eligible for a pension, surviving instead on social welfare. Eventually, she got her pension at the expense of that welfare. It was not much more, and money remained tight. Believe me when I say that I asked her about 1,000,000 times, and believe me when I say she wanted to, but she simply could not afford to care for another child. Rest assured she was very involved with his eventual adoption. The orphanage even required her approval for the adoption to go ahead. Her primary concern was that his new parents would take him somewhere far away and separate the two of us. She knew how much of a safe space our home had become for him, and how important his friendship with me was. Thankfully, his new parents were nothing shy of saints and did whatever it took to accommodate him. His schedule did not change. He still spent most of his time in Grant's care, most of his time with me. All that changed is that instead of returning home to the orphanage, he would return home to his new parents. They killed him with kindness for such a long time before he finally accepted them. Kind of like Logan in a way, I suppose. but are truly wonderful people. They just wanted to give forgotten, unfortunate, and timid young girl a chance. He was a model teen despite everything. But I imagine you are wondering what this has to do with Tobias. Well, first, I would like to ask you a question. You said you were aware of the stereotypes surrounding bulls, yes? Yep, I've definitely heard that one before. Tell me, are there any similar stereotypes you can think of? Oh geez, off the top of my head, they say foxes are kinda loose, but Dom certainly doesn't seem that way. Indeed, stereotypes don't usually come from nowhere, and as such sometimes bear some semblance to the truth. But a lot of the time, they simply are not accurate reflections of reality. Dom is one such case. True enough, though they say cheetahs are hyper as kids, and honestly, Axel still is sometimes. And of course, sometimes these stereotypes can be right on the money. But it is important not to judge a book by its cover. Bro, Axel's mom is even more energetic than Axel. I swear to God, she's built different. Everyone is their own person, not necessarily beholden to the stereotypes that have become stuck to their species. It is important to give everyone their own opportunity to establish their character. Can you think of any others? They say rats are kind of sleazy. Hello, Eric, I guess. They say huskies like me scream during sex. Do they now? Goodness, what have I been doing wrong? It's like you said, stereotypes aren't always accurate. It's probably true for some huskies, I guess, or screamers, but I can't say that I've ever done it. I'll try harder next time. I look forward to you trying, just so long as you know it won't work. I suppose we will see. Now then, can you think of any more? I've heard, and from a reliable source no less, the sharks can have multiple dicks, though I guess that's not so much a stereotype as it is a biological fact. Monkeys are supposed to be even more hectic than cheetahs, apparently. And bingo. Huh? Tobias was an orphan just like Lucas, and Tobias is a monkey. Ah, I see. I assume this Tobias didn't get adopted for a long time as well, huh? I'm afraid Tobias was never adopted. He turned 18 while still under the care of the orphanage. Oh geez, and I guess he didn't fit his stereotype either? That is hard to say. His behavior could be far from ideal at times, but I fear that had less to do with any stereotypes and instead something of a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was frustrated being an orphan his whole life, and angry for being judged by people before they had even met him. He has improved in adulthood, but still can be quite the handful even now. I know he possesses some curious personality quirks. Many of them are seemingly the consequences of a less than ideal upbringing, but he's a good kid. Staunch, yes. Fiercely independent, without a doubt, but good all the same. And finally, to answer your question, the easiest explanation would be to say that Lucas is to Tobias what Gran was to him. Almost a surrogate parent in a way. Lucas never officially adopted him, but just like Gran had done for him, Tobias was always welcome at Lucas's should he need some time away. He took pity on Tobias, something of a kinship for him, them both having suffered the same fate, though Tobias endured for twice as long. Lucas is the closest thing Tobias ever had to a parent, besides the matron. And even now, Lucas is looking out for him whenever possible. I never saw Lucas as a dad. He's so tough on the outside, but the more you reveal about his past and everything, the more I realize he's just a big softy. And honestly, he's warmed up to me quite a bit recently, I think. He went from being kind of grumpy to being pretty nice. Perks of dating yours truly. Lucas makes an effort with you. He typically does not with most people, and remains grumpy as you called him. There are occasional exceptions, of course. Dom is one. He's had Lucas's back through thick and thin since he began working for him. He is Lucas's most valued employee, and the only one he feels he can fully trust. That is why he is one of only 2 full-timers on Lucas's roster. That begins the question of why Eric is the other, though. It does. Believe it or not, when Eric can be focused on his tasks, he is actually quite the diligent worker. Alas, I fear that my kneecaps may meet a grisly fate if I keep discussing Lucas's private affairs like this. All I will say about Eric is that Lucas is something of a bleeding heart, a champion for the misfortunate and downtrodden. This has a lot to do with why he became involved with Tobias, and Eric, while different in a great many ways, is also in many others exactly the same. Tobias was relevant, but I would give a harder time explaining to Lucas why we had discussed Eric, so forgive me for stopping here. I'm curious, but I understand. So Tobias came back to Woodcrest then? He did, though it was on a complicated endeavor to say the least. An opportunity fell through and he ended up sleeping on the streets, too proud to ask for help. Eventually Lucas found him and forced help upon him. Thankfully he turned things around. He accepted a rather questionable job offer and turned it into something perfect for his skill set. He's even using his degree, which seems like quite the rarity in this day and age. Well, wait a sec. Suddenly it was like a lightning bolt had struck. Surely it couldn't be, right? Hey, was it Sidonia University you went to? Not ALU or one of the others. Oh yes, I believe that is correct. What did he major in? I believe it was computer science. Wait, was that not what you studied? Right, and did you say he was 22? I did, yes, surely not. From the look on Ty's face, he had predicted what I was about to tell him. I couldn't believe that it hadn't clicked sooner. Tobias, a 22-year-old monkey who had moved to Cydonia. I knew him. Diego knew him. I suppose the focus on him being an orphan here in Woodcrest had thrown me off the scent. After all, he had never told Diego or me about these things. I did not know he had been an orphan. I suppose there was still some possibility they were different people. White fur, longish hair, about my height. What an incredible coincidence. Small world, is it not? He sure sounded like him. Everything matched up, right down to his distinctive haircut. What a bizarre twist. Yeah, small world. He never told us about being an orphan or anything, but it's like you said, he's fiercely independent. And yeah, he could be quite the handful sometimes. We were sitting together in the most boring, useless class of all time during my second year, and he got me into trouble basically every day. Now that sure sounds like the Tobias I know. It's a miracle we both passed that class, and you know what? A handful is an understatement. You know when Diego is calling somebody chaotic, that is the truth. Oh, Diego, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Anyway, I suppose your next step should be to talk to Logan and see if this Toby is really the same person. If so, I believe we can facilitate a reunion. I think he'd be thrilled if we could, if a little nervous. Hell, a lot nervous. But he could sure use another friend, and I know how much he regrets how things ended between them. Well then, I leave the next step up to you. Let me know how it goes. I'll help if I'm able. Thanks, Ty. The two of us shared a smile before I turned back to look at the setting sun at the distance. But after several long moments, it became clear that Ty was still looking right at me with an expectant look on his face, and I couldn't for the life of me think why. Is everything okay, Ty? Are you not forgetting something? I don't think so. I know we went a long way off topic, but you were about to tell me about how the rest of your night went. Oh, duh, yeah, sorry. Well, like I said, he proposed the idea. He wasn't looking for anything long-term. He was eager to lose his V-card with somebody he trusted. And now that we had become friends, he trusted me. To him, I was the best opportunity he'd seen in a long while. And honestly, I wanted a piece of that, so yeah. Oh, come now. You're not in with us, so yeah. I want the details. Oh, but only if you're comfortable, of course. It's kind of weird, but okay. So he had gone all out. He had visited a sex shop that afternoon. Didn't know Woodcrest even had one. Anyway, had a small selection of equipment. I guess you would say in a bag things like blindfold, handcuffs, a cock ring, and a vibrator. How bold for his first time. I admire his spirit. I thought so too. I guess he wanted to make his first time memorable. Anyway, I blindfolded him, cuffed him to the bed, got the ring on him, vibrating him, and set to maximum strength no less. Now that does sound like a good time. Whoa, I haven't finished yet. Oh, really? Well then, please continue. After that, Come on, I'm positively trembling with anticipation. I got a little over... Oh dear. Oh god. Oh god. You know I'm here to bear and try to pass it off as a movie. Shame on you, Aiden. Guilty as charged. Oh god. Oh god. I see. Thank you for telling me, Aiden, and I apologize if that was strange for you. I simply wanted to hear what you had been up to in our time apart. I know a lot of it was rough, but I'm genuinely glad to hear that there was a good amount of fun and lighthearted stuff mixed in. Between yourself and Logan, or yourself and Axel. I am assuming you enjoyed spending the night with his family? Definitely. His dad is really cool, until he starts telling jokes. And his mom, she's terrifying, and terrible with names. I recalled everything under the sun except for Aiden. Still, they make for an entertaining duo. Well, it's good to catch up with Axel, too. Sounds like that whole Operation Foxtie thing isn't going so well, though. The whole romantic side of things is getting kind of complicated for them. Oh dear, Foxtie, do you mean? What happened? It's a long story, and I promised Axel I would keep it a secret. The simple version is that it isn't going so well. Dom isn't really taking the bait, and Axel is getting antsy. Oh dear, that does not sound good. Yeah, I encouraged him to speak to Dom directly rather than continue beating around the bush. He's nervous, but I think that's the best bet at this stage. I can only imagine. He's not the courageous type, not like you. Oh, psh! I'm serious. You're courageous enough to come here in the first place, and courageous enough to come back when you did not like how things had ended up. I am very proud of you for that, though a little ashamed I had not done it myself. Yeah, I guess. Though if I'm to be honest, telling you about what went on with me and Logan, in some weird way, that was the hardest part of it all. I could not help but think back to the dream I'd experienced that morning, how in that dream, when told about Logan, Ty spun into a furious rage. He felt betrayed by my actions, and as though I'd replaced him, and honestly, that seemed like the normal reaction to such a situation. But Ty was anything but ordinary. By his own proclamation, not only did he claim to be completely unfazed by it, but even showed interest, excitedly enjoying a beat-by-beat recap of the whole sordid affair. I admired Ty's level-headedness and maturity, but I still felt a tiny pang of doubt lingering just beneath the surface of my mind. A tiny pang which would quickly become agony if left undressed. As so, I just had to ask one more time. I just had to be sure that Ty meant what he said. Ty, if I ask you a question, can you promise to be 100% honest with me when you answer, please? It's really important. My dear, I have already promised you my honesty in every word that I speak. A solitary sentence is no different. You need not even ask. Ask away, my love. Does it bother you at all what happened with Logan? I mean, because it would be normal if it did, and that's okay. I want to work with you if that is the case. But if you don't tell me, I can't do that, so please, answer me honestly. Does it bother you, even one tiny bit? Aiden, my love. Ty pulled me into another passionate and loving kiss. I promise you from the bottom of my heart, it does not bother me, not one bit. He had once again reassured me, and once again, that lingering sense of doubt remained. It ate away at my insides, gnawing my flesh from the inside out. I don't quite know why, but I'm having a really hard time believing it. It's not that I don't trust you, because I do, 100%. Honestly, I don't know why it is. But I do. You feel the way you do because you fear that I have a problem with it, but because somewhere deep down, you do. You are simply having difficulty processing that fact, and instead you find yourself projecting that guilt on me, hoping I'll judge you so that you will not have to judge yourself. But I'm okay with it. I've done stuff like that before, and I've never had a problem. It is okay, my love. It is not the act itself you are uncertain about. It is that you feel as though you have done something terrible in the context of our relationship. After all, you slept with somebody while you were deeply in love with somebody else. That is enough to disorient anybody. You fear that you have hurt me. You fear that those actions may cost you the future you desire. And you have to come face to face with reality, expecting some kind of backlash or punishment to ease your guilty conscience. And yet, none came. You're struggling to process that the danger is over. Make it sound as though I need punishment. Well, when you put it that way, I'm sure that can be arranged. But Aiden, rest assured that everything is okay. You'll come to realize this in time. I know you're confused now, but hang in there, okay? Alright, but I'm taking you up on that offer of punishment. I know it's not exactly the right sort of punishment, but maybe it'll help me feel better. If not, at least it'll be fun. Goodness, well okay then. Punishment it is. I'm looking forward to it. So am I, and you're right, I guess I knew that already. That it wasn't my actions I was struggling with, but my emotions, my love, and my guilt. I don't regret the act itself, and I don't regret making a new friend. I don't regret that stuff at all. I'm glad to hear that, my dear. Casual encounters can be quite the mixed bag at times. I've had my fair share of regretful situations over the years, so much so that I swore off in casual encounters for good. There's a couple I guess I regret. I didn't make a habit of sleeping around, though. I just had the odd run-in here and there, to keep me from going crazy, I suppose. I also don't think I could swear them off entirely while single. I don't know how you manage. Lengthy dry spells would drive me nuts. But not to worry. With things now patched up, there will be no dry spells on the horizon for either of us, my dear. Can't wait to get started. I suppose it's been a while since you've had a proper dry spell, huh? Unless a month between Apollo and me is long enough to count. Well, whether a month counts very much depends on who you ask. For Lucas's favorite employee, I suspect a week could be quite the drought. As for me, I would not say a month counts, no. 2 or 3 perhaps, but not 1. Were you single for a while before Apollo? Yes, it had been a few years. I'd still been in the Black Claws when I dated that egocentric, pompous buffoon. Who? I rubbed my hands together in an almost comical fashion, eager to hear the tale which could transpire such venom from Ty's typical gentle demeanor. I beamed with excitement, legs crossed as I eagerly waited for Ty to elaborate. Having seen my display, he unleashed a lengthy sigh. I suppose I should have kept my mouth shut if I wanted to avoid this topic. Well, the short version is this. You remember that earlier I mentioned breaking things off with a former romantic partner in this very spot? Well, that is who I meant. Flynn was his name, a blue jay. He stood out on account of being impeccably groomed and exceptionally handsome to boot. You would hope so, given the thousands of dollars of my money spent on beauty products and the hours, plural, he dedicated each day to preening himself. It was a very short-lived romance. I had mistaken him for somebody considerably less vain and self-important. I was always second to him in everything as far as he was concerned. He treated life like it was some kind of beauty pageant, and treated others as though they were the losers in said pageant. And so it was right here several years ago. I know not why he had come along, but I know that he insisted on making my time here miserable. He did not like the wind, nor the pollen, the sun, and even the moisture in the air. Ugh. And then, almost as though the wind had grown tired of his complaints as I had, his precious designer brush was whisked away by a peculiarly powerful gust and sent careening over the edge, never to be seen again. In my word, the tantrum he threw about that, you would think someone he loved had died. Actually, scratch that. I attended his cousin's funeral, and he was not half as upset. But you see, that is the catch. Because he loved nobody more than he loved himself, and had long since driven his remaining loved ones away with his vile personality, even I, his boyfriend, was less important to him than he was. The only thing that perhaps could have rivaled his own importance was that designer brush. To him, it was akin to life itself. As I sat there, his bleeding little more than irritating background noise, I realized what Gran would have said about all this. She would have asked me why on earth I was putting up with him. She would have asked me if I even loved him. And I could have only answered no. And realizing that... Right? Like, first thing that came to mind was Flynn. I decided that enough was enough. I gave him a piece of my mind. I'd endured for far too long, and I had so much bottled up. I let loose. It was not pretty. I called him out on everything, and you know what was hilarious? He acted as though I were a fool. He simply could not believe that I dumped him. After all, he was too flawless to be dumped. That ignorant, conceited imbecile. I apologize. It is unlike me to speak with such hostility. Even the likes of Glenn I treat with more respect than I would Flynn. For all of Glenn's flaws, he has nothing on Flynn. Flynn's just something completely alien to me. I cannot put it into words. He sure sounds like a piece of work. High on his own farts, head so far up his own ass that he could precisely right. But returning to our prior topic, I was in no rush to resume dating again after that miserable experience. Honestly, being alone was 1,000 times more pleasant than being with Flynn, and drastically more affordable besides. I suppose you could say I took some time to smell the roses. But it is also true that it was around that time when the Black Claws split. I opened the bar shortly after as well, so I had plenty to keep me occupied. And eventually, Apollo would visit, and once again, I would become spoken for by a bird. Thankfully, Apollo was the total opposite of Flynn in every conceivable way. So what? That was a dry spell of a few years, I guess? It was a few years between Flynn and Apollo, certainly, but it was no dry spell. Honestly, things were drier with Flynn. He so disliked getting messy. You really hate Flynn, huh? No, I hate myself for being stupid enough to date a guy like him in the first place. I resent my inability to see how bad he was for me until much too late. I regret that I let him take advantage of me in every way that he could, only to treat me like a second-class citizen. You know, you and Diego have a similar amount of venom for your exes. You two should get together and have a good old-fashioned vent one of these days. Worry not, those wounds of mine have been closed for many years now. I just make a point to never forget what happened. That way I can be sure to avoid repeating those same mistakes. If I had to choose between being alone for the rest of my life and being with him, that would become a serious dry spell. Speaking of which, you said before that between him and Apollo there was no dry spell. I thought you said you had given up casual encounters. Indeed, I had. Then... Well, I did promise you honesty, and you did tell me about your encounter with Logan, so I suppose I can tell you this. As long as you promise to keep this a secret, okay? I never said this, you never heard this, repeat it to nobody. Ooh, this is sounding saucy. Hit me, big tiger. So I was well cared for during this time, and I always have been. Starting off casual encounters was never a big deal for that reason. I don't understand. Well, let me put it to you this way. You cannot rightly call it a casual encounter when you have known the person your entire life now, can you? Oh, you and Lucas? Seriously? Easy there, I would not be surprised if he heard that all the way from Woodcrest. But seriously, isn't that super weird or something? Not at all. I suppose it might have been when we first started out, but it has practically become routine for us, though it is not enjoyable, however. Hold up. Not that it is not enjoyable, however. How long has this been going on? About 22 years. What? confused. Hold up. Axel and Russell was a shock. But 22 years. You were 17? 17, yes, and Lucas 18. Legal in this part of the world, and if you cannot wrap your head around this, try this on for size. If I'm not mistaken, that was the year you were born. Way to make this creepy, Ty. You're quite welcome, my love. Just think, I've enjoyed an extra 17 years of experience you can now benefit from. Yay for older guys, I guess, but you and Lucas, I still can't quite wrap my head around that. I can't believe that you two used to, wait, is this still something that happens? Well, we met up once after Apollo and I split, but rest assured, when either of us is in a relationship, these meetings cease. Will they continue should we both become single once again, and rest assured, Lucas and I are friends. Best friends, certainly, but our meetings, they are not in romantic in context. It's quite simply a case of two friends helping each other out. We both have needs, and we share the means to satisfy them. So if we are otherwise unoccupied, what is it they say? A friend is in need of a friend indeed? Man, if Eric knew about this, he would be so jealous. Little hornball is hell-bent on getting in Lucas's pants. Please, a pint-sized pipsqueak like him would lack the capacity. Huh? Lack the capacity? Let's merely say that if the unlikely day were to come where he got his wish, it would be wise to have an ambulance waiting somewhere nearby. Whoa, so it's true then, what they say about bulls? In general, yes, but even among his kind, my friend is rather If you say some cheesy shit like your heart, I swear. What the fuck? What the fuck? Sure. I'm dead serious, and on a similar serious note, please know there is nothing romantic between Lucas and me. We're simply close friends with a dire lack of boundaries, and nothing will happen. And nothing will happen going forward. Simply put, Oh god! I guess in a really weird and vaguely gross way, it's kind of sweet what you guys have. It speaks for how close you two are that you help each other out like that. You guys met up once after Apollo, you said, I hope Lucas isn't mad that I stole you away so quickly. Not one bit. Lucas is nothing but supportive of my romantic endeavors. And yours for that matter. He will do everything he can to ensure that we thrive together. Besides, we're not tripping over one another hoping for a shot with him. He could have his pick even now I would wager. Not bad for 40. Worst case scenario, he can always cough up some dough for Eric's medical bills, right? It will be a snowy day in hell when that happens, I can assure you. And I know it might have seemed like a joke to you, but I was dead serious. You know, taking a step back from this whole discussion, it really didn't take us long to make this sexual, did it? Oh dear, I apologize. It is my fault for pushing in details about your encounter with Logan. Would you rather that we change the topic? I mean, my brain is all like, we have stuff to do, but my dick is in heaven right now. I can see that I'm also enjoying this a little more than I perhaps should be. One more topic, then we should get our affairs in order. Agreed? Agreed. Lovely, I apologize, but I cannot think of one. I can, but it might make it super weird. And everything else we have discussed was not super weird. I'm listening intently, my dear. Okay, I guess I'm curious about Apollo. He's kind of a different species, right? I mean, he wasn't, but he also kind of was. Hey, you know what I'm trying to say. Point is, I'm curious whether he had anything, I don't know, different or interesting going on. A perfectly good question. Anatomically, Apollo was exactly what you would expect. There was nothing that was unusual among avian men. And I should know, I had 2 avian boyfriends in a row. Sounds to me like you have a type. Oh please, I can assure you it was purely coincidence. I am relatively unconcerned by species. It is our connection that is important. This is going downhill quickly. So I guess things in the bedroom were business as usual with Apollo then? You would think that, but actually that is not so. He may well have been anatomically ordinary, but there was no array of quirks I'd have taken into consideration. For instance, I cannot be half as rough with Apollo as I have already been with you. Why is that? Is he more sensitive or something like that? Not sensitive, fragile. His appearance may seem youthful, but remember, he is thousands of years old, and thus lacks the constitution you and I take for granted. I am certain he told you of his kind were failed experiments. It would be unlike him if he had not. Well, it is not to say that Marston did not achieve some fantastic feats with the Immortals, and the experiments which led to their birth fueled some incredible useful research, but to achieve actual immortality, they were indeed considered failures. You see, they were never truly immortal, perhaps indefinite is a better word. It is impossible to say how long each immortal has, but their death is not a matter of if, rather a matter of when. In addition, the very modifications which facilitated these incredibly long lives also resulted in a litany of unpleasant and oftentimes crippling side effects. Each immortal differed from the last, and so too did they experience unique flaws when compared to their kin, and severe fragility was one of the many experienced by Apollo. I see, he never talked about this. I guess we were borrowed on time. It makes sense. What exactly made him so fragile? Was there some specific issue, or was it just a fact of life or something for him? I cannot say that I fully understand the finer points, though there are several things he explained to me which are related in some way to another. Allow me to recall. One thing he told me was this. Think about how many calories the average person needs to break even. For people like Axel and Dawn probably require around 2,000 calories to make do. For Lucas and me, we generally require 3,500 to 4,000 on account of our stature and musculature. With that in mind, how many do you think Apollo would require each day? I know exactly what you're about to do. I'm going to give you a reasonable guess and say it's going to be way off because Apollo is different, right? So shit, I don't know if Axel needs 2, Apollo maybe 2.25. He's very thin, but he's kind of tall too. Wrong, in fact, you caught it perfectly. Apollo is different to a tune of around 10,000 calories a day. In other words, he would have to eat 5 times as much as Axel just to survive. He took a veritable pharmacy's worth of vitamins and supplements every day to compensate for the lack of nutrition in his meals, then focusing specifically on foods with a very high fat content. A gram of fat contains more than twice as many calories as a gram of carbohydrates and a gram of protein, you see. This means copious quantities of fast food, fried foods, and foods cooked in butter and fats battered everything. Drown it in cheese and mayonnaise. Forget water, drink milkshakes. Time for dessert, do not forget the cream. Geez, Diego would be jealous, but I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack just thinking about it. That sounds disgusting. Indeed, and it gets worse. If he had a healthier diet, he would not be able to fit enough into his body to meet his needs. He would die within a matter of weeks. He has no choice but to eat poorly, and in massive quantities no less. And despite that, he remains chronically underweight. Sometimes even dangerously so, and there's not a single thing you can do to rectify this. Because of that, as well as his struggles with nutrition, he is abnormally frail and frighteningly prone to broken bones and other injuries. As such, any kind of physical exertion is out of the question for Apollo, and it also meant I had to watch my strength with him. I once broke 2 of his ribs with a hug that would not have been half as tight as the hug we shared earlier this evening. Thankfully, every crowd has a similar lining, as they say. His wildly accelerated metabolism does come with a few perks. For instance, those broken bones healed completely within 3 days. Small lacerations often vanish within a matter of hours as well. As prone to injury as Apollo was, an injury that would put the average person out of action for weeks would heal in a couple of days. A seriousness with which we treat our own minor cuts would be equivalent to his response to a far more substantial injury. A broken wrist from a handshake gone wrong? No big deal. That's definitely a perk. A shame about all the other crap that comes along with it. Definitely isn't worth it. Apollo vehemently agrees. And while there are other perks when you consider how utterly banal some of them are, it almost seems as some kind of cruel joke. What other perks were there? Well, his feathers, for instance. Never in my life I felt feathers so incredibly soft. I've never dated a bird myself, forgive me for consulting the expert. How soft are they usually? Expert? I beg your pardon, I've dated 2 birds, and 2 does not an expert make. Oh, that's right, there was Lewis. 3 birds does not an expert make. Yeah, you and your feather fever. Answer the question. Ty sighed, having well and truly been called out. Of course, I was merely having fun at his expense, and you knew this full well. But it made for enjoyable banter. Even something as mundane and pedestrian as this, I'd missed it. I was so glad to have Ty back. Well, it varies from species to species. Some species are predisposed to having softer plumage, while other species may have a consistency not unlike newspaper. While I've only gotten this close to the one raven, I previously had a run-in with the crow. His certainly fell into the latter category. And what was his name? Flynn? But he made damn sure his were super soft, right? Certainly. He spared no expense as he dug through my wallet, sourcing funds to bankroll such an extravagant beauty regime, and he certainly did not keep them soft for my benefit. Nah, but here's the kicker. This is priceless. I'm listening. Apollo's were softer, dramatically so in fact, and he did not use a single product of any sort to achieve it. That was simply how his feathers were. He reasoned that the fat in his diet helped a great deal. There was another reason, too. That was the rate at which his feathers grew. Just like he healed 5 times faster than the average person, he also molted 5 times faster. Every day, picking up feathers, finding them in couch cushions, tucked in blankets, stuck to towels, clogging the drain in the shower. Worse yet, he picked up most of his own shedding. Stuff I found was just stuff he missed the first time around. Far be it from me to give Flynn any credit, but his mess of blue feathers was at least mostly confined to spaces where there were mirrors. It is such a silly thing, such an insignificant thing, but I kind of miss picking up those jet black feathers, if only because he was still around to shed them. Oh, that reminds me, I brought up the topic with Apollo once, and he insisted I was exaggerating the extent of his mess. So to prove him wrong, I brought an empty pillow and began stuffing with every loose black feather I could find. It took less than a week. It made for a very comfortable pillow, too. I still have it, but I could not bring myself to use it after Apollo and I went our separate ways. It smells pleasant, it smells of him, and that just reminds me of what I have lost. Ty seemed lost in thought as he stared blankly at his feet. Our situation truly was unique. Here he was, my boyfriend, talking about another man that he loves, and my only instinct was to comfort him. Truth had always seemed stranger than fiction as of late, but I wouldn't trade that truth for anything. I put my arm around his shoulder, his response a gentle jolt of surprise as my arm made contact with his neck. He peered back at me and smiled lovingly before leaning into my side. If he had not been so much taller than I, he could have rested his head on my shoulder, so instead I returned his gesture, resting my head on his instead. I picked up that same scent of cinnamon and coconut. Oh, how I love that fragrance. Ever since I discovered it, all it did was remind me of Ty. I am sorry if I've become something of a broken record. Suffice it to say, losing Apollo still hurts a great deal more than I could have imagined. But I know that is not fair on you. I do not want to make you feel uncomfortable. Ty. It didn't make me uncomfortable at all, because I knew he loved me with all his heart, even though he loved Apollo just as much. Love is not finite. You do not share love. There's endless love for all, no matter how far and wide that love may be spread. All I wanted was to be there for Ty, to comfort him, love him, listen to him, to ease his pain, and to share in this terrible burden that weighed so heavily upon his shoulders. I've never been more comfortable, and if talking about it is helping you in any way, that's what I want you to do. Ty wore that same loving smile once again, the sadness in his eyes seemingly swallowed whole by the joy he felt sitting by my side. Little by little, we watched as the sun's last rays disappeared behind the quiet, distant mountains, plunging Woodcrest in the darkness of the night. It reminded me of the night we went camping. We had watched the sunset then as well, though despite only being a few days ago, so much had changed since then that it felt more akin to a lifetime. But same as then, I had everything I could have wished for in my handsome tiger companion who at long last had spoken up, reminiscing about Apollo and bearing his heart to me, and I'll do everything I could to help that broken heart of his finally mend. Flynn used to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on oils, brushes, and other products to smooth his beak and give it a pristine shine. Same as with the feathers, Apollo's beak was always effortlessly immaculate. I bet if you had polished it, you could see a reflection. Man, if Flynn knew, I bet he'd be fuming. What else was there that was different or special about Apollo? He was by far the hottest person I've ever shared a bed with. I'm right here, dude. I knew you would bite. Fear not, my love, for I mean hot in a literal sense. He positively radiated warmth. All this made for some very pleasant winter nights with Apollo acting as my substitute electric blanket. This was not something that Apollo found pleasant himself. It was not so bad during the winter, but in the summer he would perpetually exist on the verge of heat stroke. Ooh, I bet you gave his heat a stroke. My goodness, Aiden, that was appalling. Sorry, I kind of jumped on that one before I'd really thought it out. Well, you were mechanically correct at least. I can personally confirm that it... Jeez. Apollo... Remember, Aiden, it takes two to tango, and you certainly deserve the blame for the last one. Yeah, I guess you got me there. And you know, this heat of Apollo's doesn't sound pleasant in summer. Indeed, he was very limited as to what he could do on the hottest days. I usually ran errands on his behalf so that he could remain behind in the air conditioning. Merely standing outside for a few minutes was enough for him to collapse. Man, in the middle of summer and everything, he misses out on all the best parts of summer, like the beach. Actually, while he cannot sunbathe, the water keeps him cool enough as long as he stays far enough in. Oh, and any larger waves are a no-go. That is begging for broken bones. All in all, perhaps not the greatest beach-going experience, but better than nothing, I suppose. I'm so glad I'm not an immortal. None of that sounds any fun at all. Apollo would strongly agree, and honestly so would I. Mortality sounds just fine to me. Thank you very much. I think the worst part is that invisible clock. You and I can make an educated guess on how many years we have left, and bar any unexpected occurrences would likely be fairly accurate. But for Apollo, he has no way of knowing. He may live for another 1,000 years, or instead, he might only have another 6 months. With Artemis, there were no signs, no hints or indications. Nothing to suggest his end might have been looming until it actually came. By the end, he knew By the time he knew he was dying, he had already fallen ill to settle any affairs or fulfill any last wishes. His time was up, and that was that. While Apollo's life certainly has a great many challenges, he would much rather be there than the alternative. Since what happened to Artemis, he has been somewhat paranoid. He knows this and admits to it, but the panic he feels is no less intense every time he finds something new to obsess over. Obsess over? Like what exactly? Any changes in his body, his appearance, anything out of the ordinary, for instance. He fixated on the lines around his eyes. If only he were a crow, calling them raven's feet lacks the same humor. He insisted that they had not always been there. Though as camera shy as he is, there was a distinct lack of photographic evidence, and regretfully, I do not recall whether they were present the very first time we met. He would obsess over them from time to time, which makes so little sense considering Artemis reported no such changes leading up to his passing, and Apollo knows this, but he lived in a state of perpetual worry all the same. I guess when all of your siblings have dropped dead around you, it only makes sense that you watch the clock obsessively. The unpredictability of it must be such agony. I can only imagine he constantly second-guesses his plans, wondering if he'll even be around to see them through. Indeed, and all that is on top of his own grief, he and Artemis were inseparable for more than 1,000 years, only for him to vanish within a couple of short months. On a scale of 1,000 years, months might as well be seconds. And though Artemis has been gone for more than a century now, a century to him still seems like little more than a week past, and the pain he feels remains so fresh that it might as well have been. Thousands of years of experiences, accomplishments, and emotions. A multi-millennial legacy just gone in a matter of weeks. I would say it seems far too cruel to be real, but honestly, the fact that it is so cruel is how you know it's real. Indeed. Apollo is very sweet, extremely clever, well-educated, and it seems like he's just trying to do right by everybody. I haven't known the truth for long, but I've come to respect Apollo a great deal since. He deserves better than a surprise passing, and because he lives in secrecy, so few will even remember him. Not exactly. Sebastien du Vaumonde has been gone for a very long time now, and he just had a cafe named in his honor. While Solomon kept a lower profile, those who had dealings with him all remember him fondly. Few will remember Apollo, but his legacy will live on through the many pseudonyms he has gone by for years yet to come. They will remember his kindness, his selflessness, his stalwart moral code, and his unflinching dedication to helping everybody that he could. Well said. That kind of sounds a lot like this tiger I happen to know. Who, me? Oh, shucks. I concede Apollo had quite the impact on me. 20 years ago, we might have been polar opposites, but thankfully I mellowed with time, and once Apollo and I had met once again, it was like we were two peas in a pod. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that he is my hero. I know that sounds strange, but all that he has seen and done throughout his life, all the kindness, fairness, and selflessness he had shown, how he traveled the lands with Artemis, selling medicines and only taking enough for them to survive. In times when he ruled, justice and equality were of the utmost importance, with every man and woman treated fairly and as equals, to one another and especially himself. He cared so genuinely about those he protected, be they residents of a colossal and mighty kingdom, or a small idyllic mountain town named Woodcrest. Through all the tragedies he has endured, through all the trials he has conquered, the challenges he has overcome and still overcomes each and every day of his sometimes torturous life, he still puts others above himself and strives to do what is right. Throughout my life, I've met a great many wonderful and selfless people, but Apollo was by far the most wonderful and selfless of them all, and is an example by which we should all strive to live by. I know I certainly do. Hallelujah. By now, the shades of night had well and truly descended, the view ahead populated by golden lights and occupied houses, and street lights, and above by a mesmerizing blanket of glimmering stars. It was getting late, and I didn't want to imagine what might happen if I did not arrive home in time. It's getting late. So it is, but there's so much yet to discuss. I suppose we'll have all the time in the world when you think about it. But there are a few things that would be best addressed here and now. Oh yeah? What you got? First and foremost, Diego has been somewhat testy since you left my employ, and God forbid that he rubs off on Russell. If only I could provide him with somebody who is a better influence, and, well, I have missed working beside you, my dear. Your presence made an extraordinary workday extraordinary. That's very forthcoming of you. You didn't even build up to it, you just started laying down the compliments. Did you not just say I was getting late? You really ought to make up your mind, my dear. Yeah. But I digress. Despite these feelings, I do not feel that offering you your old position would be the right thing to do. Huh? What exactly did Ty mean by that? I would have been more than happy with that offer, and would have gratefully accepted. I missed working beside him too, and I wanted to spend every minute of every day by his side, working or otherwise. I didn't understand. I want to do everything in my power to make sure we do things the right way this time, and I do not believe that the status quo is necessarily the greatest hit. Apollo sacrificed a lot to give us this chance. I will not allow it to be in vain, and I cannot help but think of the best example. I cannot help but think of the example Apollo has set. He considered everybody his equal. He did not give orders as much as he inspired those around him to follow his lead of their own free will, and those very people would be treated like family and shown the respect and trust such a family deserves. That got me thinking. I do not want to be your employer quite simply because I do not wish for any scenario where you and I are anything but equals. Therefore, I would like to propose a different offer, should you wish to hear it. Alright, hit me. I could never hit a handsome mug like yours, my love. My proposal is this. How would you like to help me run the bar? Not as an employee, but as an equal. We will share in the responsibilities as well as the spoils. But make no mistake, the work can be grueling at times, but it can be so incredibly rewarding as well. I'd love to have you by my side sharing in those rewards. Hold on just a tick, I'm barely out of training, and you're promoting me up to, what, like a manager or something? Meanwhile, Diego has worked for you a good year or so. You know he's going to be pissed, right? Of course, and the moment you mention that the position involves extra work, he will simmer right back down again. Diego is marvelously predictable. And Russell, he'll be thrilled for you, and I'll be thrilled that Diego is not spending the day teaching him new curse words. You know, I don't think Russell is as innocent as you seem to think. That is a technicality, my dear. My point merely being that going forward, I would love to work as partners and as equals. On paper, you will be an employee. I doubt you'll have the dough to buy out half of my share, after all. But your responsibilities will be the same as mine, and so too will your compensation. Yeah, I've got a quarter and some belly button lint to my name right now. Unless you're into the lint, in which case I'm sure we can cut a deal. But I guess if things really went well, I could save up and become a joint owner if I wanted, right? Exactly right. Although that would be your choice, the responsibilities and compensation would be the same either way. The only difference would be whether you have equity in the business. That is a boring discussion, and I do not require an answer right away. I simply wish to present the offer to you. You may think it over as long as you would like, and should you not wish to take on this additional responsibility, I'll still love to have your back and will settle for your original position. But I think this would be a wonderful experience to work so closely alongside one another. And I admit, as the business grows in the leaps and bounds it has in recent months, I've been growing steadily more desperate for somebody to help me run things. It would be an immense weight off my shoulders were to accept, but the last thing I would want is to pressure you into a situation where you're not I'll do it. Oh? After all, how could I refuse? It was an opportunity to work even more closely with Ty, and it presented a wonderful chance to make some serious cash. Not only that, but my hard work would ease the burden on his shoulders. And wasn't that what teamwork was all about? So long as there's training involved, I'm more than willing to give it a shot. Hopefully with the two of us looking over things, we'll have plenty of free time we can spend together too, and I think it'll be fun. Wonderful, I'm thrilled that you have accepted my offer. I believe it will be the first step into a wonderful future enjoyed by one another's side. Though I do have one condition. Of course, let us hear it. I'll feel bad taking a cut right now, so until I've proven myself, just pay me what you are, okay? Once I'm fully trained up and have showed you what I'm worth, then we can look at money again. But for now, just the wage, okay? Are you certain? I can't help but feel that would not be fair. And neither is paying me a slice when I'm not even working for it yet. So yeah, I'm sure. And I won't accept any argument to the contrary. I see. Very well, I accept your terms. I'm nonetheless thrilled to have an extra pair of hands. I can see that I've grown mighty tired of all the paperwork I have to do. Then allow me. Show me what I have to do and I'll do it. You can put your feet up for a change. My dear, my conscience simply would not allow me to laze about as you work so hard. I insist, it would be my treat, although if you prefer, perhaps we could split the stack and have it done in half the time. These bundles of bureaucratic joys so love to be tirelessly self-referential and needlessly convoluted. I dare say dividing them up would only make things more difficult, but I can think of a way I could make myself useful as you worked. A look of flirtatious mischief took residence upon Ty's handsome features as he slyly winked before at long last revealing his indecorous intentions.
Self-voicing enabled. Ty, you could sit at my desk and work away, all the while I could crawl underneath and show you how grateful I am for your help. Aiden.
Ha, I definitely take no responsibility for that horny diversion. Although the idea does sound rather intriguing, perhaps we could take turns showing our gratitude? Of course, and neither Diego nor Russell have any idea that the paperwork is a one-man job. We would have quite the alibi. You crafty cat, I should hope that you find this a lot of paperwork to do. Ah, my dear, there's always paperwork to be done if you look hard enough for it. I'm sure we'll both be looking for more... Oh, sure we'll... Aiden, you should be ashamed of yourself and in picking such low-hanging fruit. I would wager that even Diego would roll his eyes over that one. If you think that was bad, you have got to meet Axel's dad. His jokes and puns are the stuff of nightmares. I felt genuine physical pain as he told them. My interest is certainly piqued, and if I'm quite honest, any sense of humor is preferable to none. I spent all those years in a band alongside Glenn, and let me tell you, one time I remember hearing him laugh was watching a traffic collision. I wish that were a joke. Seriously? Jeez, I bet Jay is a real breath of fresh air. To say the least, a bit flirtatious certainly, but with such charm and charisma, and more than enough musicianship to back it all up, I'm thrilled to have him on board, even if he makes poor choices from time to time. Wait, huh? Poor choices? Sounds to me like I've missed out on some drama. Oh, indeed, I apologize. Of course you're not aware. Cannot believe that didn't cross my mind. So what's the goss? Well, can I count on your attendance at our practice tomorrow night? You bet your sweet stripy ass you can. My word. And I apologize, but I think it would be best if you heard the story directly from the man himself. I cannot imagine that he would have any issues with telling you, but relaying it myself feels like a breach of his privacy. That only makes me more intrigued. I apologize, and for what it is worth, I know I promised I would keep no secrets from you. If you insist, I will tell you, but it is simply not my secret to share, that is all. I understand, and thanks for offering to tell me. I'll just have to try and be patient, I think. Whatever it is, it sounds like a doozy, and where better to hear it than from the source. Precisely right. Thank you for your understanding, my love. Of course, I trust you, Ty. I know you're only doing this for the right reasons, that you're merely protecting Jay's privacy. It's nice that you're so trustworthy. I try to be. Oh, and beyond that one specific tale, there's one little report from Blackhawk's front. Jay's memorized in 3 days what would have taken Glenn in 2 entire weeks, and he plays the material tighter than Glenn ever could. There are only a couple days left until the show, but I feel confident that we will be fighting fit on time. What about the new song, though? They're going to need time to learn it. It was the ending you didn't like, right? It was, but thankfully, the story from which I drew my inspiration has undergone a rather wonderful twist. I know exactly how the song should end, and I will have it ready to present to the others at tomorrow night's practice. That's great, Ty. You're going to knock it out of the park. I just know it. Thanks to you, my dear. Thank you again for coming back and giving me one more chance to make things right. It means more to me than you could ever know. I should be thanking you for giving me another chance, but I know what you're going to say. It takes 2 to tango, right? Indeed, my love, indeed. Now then, I do not suppose you would care to keep me company in my abode for the rest of the evening? Honestly, I'll take you up on that in a heartbeat if I hadn't promised Diego I'd be home tonight. If I didn't show up for the 3rd night in a row, broken kneecaps would be the least of my worries. A terrific point. By all means, tend to the disorderly dingo back home. It is like I said earlier, you and I, we have all the time in the world ahead of us. There is no need to rush. Right, so seeing as we're both business partners or whatever now, how's the roster looking for tomorrow? Do you think I'll need to go in? Do not worry, there is no need. Diego is opening tomorrow, and Russell is coming in a little later than usual on account of the combat tournament. I will cover until he arrives, and then, well, I hope that you would like to go on a date with me instead. We can spend the day together to get things back on track. Just you and me. What do you say? Sounds like my idea of a good time. Count me in. Is Russell watching the fights with Axel again? Indeed, and if I'm not mistaken, it is your Logan they are cheering for. You know, you really ought to join them. I hear he's rather impressive in the ring. Sure, I could have done that, gone with Russell and Axel to the fight, and then accompanied Russell back to the bar where I'd meet up with Ty. But as Ty's business partner, I felt compelled to put Ty first instead. Why don't I work in your stead? I'm your business partner and all that now, after all. I should take some responsibility. You can enjoy a relaxing moment, and I get to abuse my newfound power to boss Diego around. Oh my, sounds as though you have thought long and hard about how to abuse your position. I thank you for thinking with me, Aiden, but please, it is quite alright. No, it's not. Let me show you how serious I am about all this. I'll take care of it, I insist. Serious indeed. But I'm afraid you being there would not relieve me of my duties. In truth, tomorrow is a Tuesday. Tuesday is not a busy day. Diego can handle things on his own without issue, while I'm there to cover just in case. I intend to spend most of the time doing taxes and paychecks instead. And while these will be among your responsibilities, there are things I must train you on first. As such, even if you worked, I would still be there. The timing of all this is convenient for me. There's one such reason that I am happy to cover Russell's absence. So thank you for the offer, my dear, but I must decline. Like I suggested before, why don't keep Russell and Axel company instead? I'm sure they would appreciate it. Yeah, I guess so. I hope Logan doesn't get hurt tomorrow, though. I wouldn't want to see that. Honestly, I hope neither of them do. But I suppose you do not know who Logan's next opponent is, do you? Huh? Who is it? It is Jay. He has quite the busy schedule at the moment. I am worried he will injure himself and not make the concert. He assures me he is of sturdier stuff than that, but I cannot help but worry. Perhaps you could do me a favor and keep an eye on him? Ugh, you've twisted my arm. Fine, I'll watch the fight tomorrow, and then I'll come back to the bar with Russell, and all going well, we can do our thing. Perfect. All going well, I will have everything finished on your arrival so we can head straight out. Sounds great. Did you have any ideas of where we could go? A couple so far, but nothing I am dead set on just yet. Good things take time, so I will continue to ponder, and should you have any ideas of your own, I am I would be most excited to hear them as well. Gotcha. After that, we can meet the others for practice, then perhaps we could head back to my place where we can break the 20-year seal on this marvelous birthday gift. That sounds amazing, except Axel's dad, he seemed to have a very low opinion of this whiskey. He said it tastes all kinds of nasty. Is he right? Well, nasty is a rather strong word. I would sooner describe it as distinctive. That's just a friendly way of saying it tastes nasty. I cannot deny that it is an unforgettable flavor, though perhaps not for the right reasons, but fear not, my love. Should you find it not to your liking, I have an extra cabinet for you to choose a substitute from. Though chances are you will never have an opportunity to sample this beverage again, so I encourage you to at least give it a try. I'll try, but I make no promises. Honestly, I'm kind of dreading it now. At this rate, you are going to get yourself all hyped up thinking it is so much worse than it truly is. I promise you, as unique a flavor as it may be, it really is not all that bad. I sincerely hope that you're right, Ty. Now then, I think that just about covers the pressing matters. There will be plenty of time for discussion in the coming days, but for now, I think it best we make our way back to Woodcrest. Would you agree? Wholeheartedly. Diego probably arrived home already. Biddy's probably getting himself worked up. If I don't double time, my kneecaps are going to pay the ultimate price. My goodness, well, if he follows through, I'll be sure to kiss them better for you tomorrow, my love. I'm holding you to that. Come, I'll take you home. The sooner you arrive, the less violent you will surely become. Pray for me, Ty. Pray for me. Having spent hour after hour leaning against that lonesome tree, the time of our departure had finally arrived for us both to making our way to Ty's car, or patiently awaiting our arrival a short distance from the entrance to the clearing. Climbing inside, the familiar upholstery instilled within me a sense of comfort. I had come so close to never seeing it again, so close to closing the book that was our relationship for good, but instead my desperate ploy had turned things around at the last minute. So perhaps it was silly that seeing that upholstery again brought me such joy, but it was what that moment symbolized that mattered most. And Ty, having noticed my chipper grin, returned his own kind. I'd won him back. Against all odds, everything had worked out. And this time, things would be different. This time, we'd get her happily ever after. And the passionate kiss that many would have considered overlong, we bid one another adieu. If our lips had remained locked for the rest of our lives, I would not have minded one bit. Despite this, I was appreciative when he reminded me of the menacious mammal who impatiently awaited my return, growing more and more cantankerous with each second wasted. Following our fond farewell, it was a hint of sorrow that I watched his sedan vanish beneath the night's dark shroud. Of course, there was little sense and much sadness. I'd see my beloved boyfriend again in no time. I mounted the front porch, the ancient faded wood creaking beneath with each step as I arrived at Diego's front door. Through the glass, the only source of light in the blackened hallway had originated from the fully lit living room off on one side. I vigorously shook myself to hype myself up for the fateful encounter that lay in store. Diego would inquire about Apollo, and I could return a little that would not be sparse or vague. I knew with certainty that he would not be happy. I could only pray that he would show mercy. We're going to leave off here tonight. Just the amount of fear right now. That honestly might be the longest stream I've ever done. Actually, let me check because I've done a couple long ones. Not as long as Echo Route 65, I think. Actually, let me check YouTube because I'm actually kind of curious now. YouTube Studio. Content. Okay, so last night was 2 hours and 5 minutes. Now to check the other one. Oh god. Oh god, so many. Here we go. On what I'm looking for. Echo Route 65, Route 65, Route 65. No, this is the longest one by far. Oh well. It was. Honestly, I'm actually looking forward to making the TikTok right now. So I'm gonna get to it. I have already decided on something. I have decided it this morning while at work. I have decided it. So I'm going to make it. So, I'm just gonna leave off. Stay safe, have a good night, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.